Alright, we're just waiting for court to start, guys. It's scheduled for 9, so any minute. Jay Anderson is one of 3 people killed by former Wauwatosa police officer Joseph Mensah. He was asleep in his car in a park. And Mensah shot and killed him. If you guys don't know the background, That's the first article that we wrote for day one. This is the second article. These are really detailed.
What you call Mike?
So we live streamed day two.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Hoping to get started very soon. We're having an issue connecting to the live stream. So that's going to have to be remedied before we can start the hearing, given the fact that we have limited seating. And once again, there is no cell phone use in the courtroom. If you need to use your phone, step out in the hallway. There's no photography. There's no recording. And cell phones are subject to confiscation. So don't want to do it, but you can't use them inside. So just step out in the hall if you need to do something and let the bailiff know that you're going to be right back in, and then we'll save your spot and go from there. I'm very pleased with the way people have been respectful throughout these proceedings so far. I'm going to ask for that to continue. And what I mean by that is that we conduct ourselves in the courtroom as you would expect people would. So I know that the passions are high, but we really cannot have any outbursts of personal expression from the gallery, otherwise you gotta go. So, like I say, I don't want to put anybody out, I don't want to take anybody's cell phone, but we do have some basic rules that have to be followed, and they get enforced no matter what kind of case it is. So, so just be aware of that, and I have called for help, technical help here to see if we can get on the Zoom shortly. Then we will begin, and depending on I think we'll just start, and then if Mr. Bayer shows up at some point soon, we'll take a break. I don't think it really affects your starting with your first witness. So I've had Mr. Bayer in civil court many times. He's typically pretty punctual, so I don't know if something happened to him this morning. If you want to try and reach out to him, you can, but we're here all day as far as I know, so yeah.
You're on the county laptop, so just close this.
Yeah, he's cranky today, though.
Oh, well, look at that.
It's just the error message I got.
How's the sound? Is the sound all right? Are we having issues with this mic?
Okay, let's call the case, and then we'll start with the first witness, unless is there anything we need to address prior to that?
You guys are going to have to let me know throughout this if this mic starts dorking out again.
Attorney, sorry. Number one, the attorney for Joseph Mensah, he filed a motion to dismiss. I believe we're going to address that first. And then the second thing is that we filed a protective order to the court yesterday. Attorney Bayer and I agreed on the proposed order, and if you wanted to address that on the record.
Well, I think we probably better do that. Mr. Bayer's here, but
all right.
My intention is with regard to the motion
I'll be back.
was to set that for a different day. So I don't know if I didn't communicate that clearly. I want to get the testimony in the record. There were a number of late filings, and so that will not be, I don't know what I said. I may have told you that, but that's not my plan right now. That, I believe, is quite peripheral to what we're trying to do here. So to those of you on Daycast, good morning. I've said this before, although now I realize it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right. I'm gonna go tell them something else.
Okay. Which is, if you can't hear, it might be because your mute's on. Of course, if I tell you that and you can't hear, it's not going to do you very much good. But that has apparently been a common experience with some of the daycast broadcasting that if you don't unmute yourself, you could have sound problems. So,
Your Honor, the Councilperson Melly's here. I think we can set a new date.
okay,
That's okay.
that's fine. We'll do that before we start. And you can go if you want.
All right.
Then we'll start.
Attorney Mayor and Attorney Motley, could you come up to the desk, please? Judge wants to set a 1-hour hearing for your motion to dismiss. So, do you want to do that in person or can we do it on Zoom? Okay. So we can still cast. So.
Yeah. Sure. Well, except, I'm sorry? Yeah, that's what I thought. The only thing is, I was going to do it before that. If you want to, I don't care. Okay. Let's try and pick an earlier date for this motion, and then we'll give you a different date for the closing. And that we won't need to find as big a block of time either. I mean, I think this is probably a half hour, so I said an hour just to be on the safe side, but.
May 17 and 18, late morning or early afternoon? It's a Monday, Tuesday, May 17, 18, Monday, Tuesday.
That's what
Yeah, we can do it via Zoom. Mm-hmm. How about the 17th at 2 o'clock? Oh, sure, we could do 10 o'clock. And that's only for your motion?
Right.
Okay. I didn't know what the judge, you mean for a date after that?
Yeah, we'll deal with that later.
Thank you. May 17, 10 a.m. via Zoom. Do you have I'm assuming you have our login, say logged in before. Yeah, you guys. It'll be the same, yes.
You ready?
All right, thank you.
All right, she's ready.
Okay. In Re 968.02 sub 3 complaint, 20 JD15 appearances.
Attorney Kimberly Motley appears on behalf of petitioners Linda Anderson, Jay Anderson, and Starkeisha Della Rosa. Good morning.
Good morning. You prepared to proceed?
Yes, I am.
And you indicated that you anticipate calling 5 witnesses today, is that true?
That's correct.
And you want to put the order out there at this point? Or I know there could be a mix-up regarding 2 and 3, but
The general order, Your Honor, is the first witness will be Starkeisha De La Rosa, and then we'll have either Chief Barry Weber, or Lieutenant Joseph Roy. And then the fourth witness will be William Harmony, and the fifth witness will be Ricky Burns.
okay, very good. Anything that we need? I know we've addressed the motion, dismissed off the record, and set a date for that. Anything else that we need to take up right now?
I believe we're going to discuss something when Attorney Bayer is able to get here.
Right. Yeah, and I'll just wait till he gets here to take that up. So you can call your first witness.
I'd like to call Starkeisha De La Rosa, please.
Please remain standing and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes. You may be seated. And your testimony, you may remove your mask. Please state and spell your first and last name.
Starkeisha De La Rosa, Starkeisha Delarosa.
Okay, very good. You can, please speak right in the microphone. You can bend it down a little bit if that works better for you. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Now, Ms. De La Rosa, you and Jay Anderson Jr., you have a child in common, correct?
Yes,
And in September 2016, did you hire an attorney to represent you?
yes, I hired Saffron.
Do you recall how long he represented you?
We hired him in September and he let the case go in August of 2018.
Sorry, could you say the attorney's full name? Who's the attorney that you hired to represent you?
Saffron,
Do you know his first name?
Jonathan.
Thank you. And you stated you hired him September 2016, and when did that representation conclude?
August 2018.
Okay. And with that representation, do you know if Attorney Saffron ever reached out to the Wauwatosa Police Department?
Yes,
And do you know why he reached out to the Wauwatosa Police Department?
he had reached out to get Joseph Mensah personal file.
Okay. And do you know if he received Joseph Mensah's personnel file?
It took a minute for him to get it, but he did end up getting it.
Do you recall when he received Joseph Mensah's personnel file?
No,
Okay. Have you had a chance to review the file, the personnel file of Joseph Mensah that Attorney Saffron handed over?
yes.
Okay. And what I'd like to do is present to you what's been marked as Exhibit 61. And Exhibit 61, for the record, is the Wauwatosa Police Department internal investigation of Antonio Gonzalez, an undated internal investigation. When? I'm sorry. My fault. He give this one to her and that one to the court. Thank you. Okay. Now, as I said, for the record, Exhibit 61 is the Wauwatosa Police Department internal investigation of Antonio Gonzalez, undated, correct?
Correct.
And you had a chance to review the personnel file that was given to you, that was handed over by Attorney Saffron's office.
Yes.
If you can take a minute to review this document and let me know when you're done.
I'm done.
Okay. Do you recall seeing this document in the personnel file as handed over to you by Attorney Safran's office?
Yes.
Is it in that personnel file?
Yes.
Okay, keep your voice up, please.
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall when Attorney Safran stopped representing you?
Yes, it was August of 2018.
Okay. Do you recall if in that file, if you saw any internal investigation evaluations regarding the Jay Anderson shooting?
No.
Okay. I'm going to give to you what's been marked as Exhibit 62. Sorry, it's coming. When you received the personnel file of Joseph Mensah, do you recall this document being in the personnel file?
No.
Okay. And according to your testimony, Attorney Safran received the personnel file sometime between September 2016 and August of 2018.
Correct.
Okay. What I want to show to you what's been already marked also as Exhibit 63, which is an affidavit from Attorney Jerome Conco. Now, with regards to point number 9, it says that the Wauwatosa Police Department provided Attorney Safran with what was purported to be Officer Mensah's complete personnel file after April 6, 2017. Do you see that?
Yes.
And for the record, I'm sorry, what we presented is Exhibit 63, which is an affidavit of Attorney Jerome Conco, signed November 10th, 2020. Now, according to point 10, it states that the alleged complete personnel file of Officer Joseph Mensah that we requested and received did not contain the undated 7-page document with a written number of 16-18370 internal administrative review of the Jay Anderson shooting. Would you say that that's an accurate statement?
Yes.
According to the affidavit number 11, it states that the alleged complete personnel file of Joseph Mensah that we requested and received did not contain an undated 6-page document, internal administrative review of the Jay Anderson shooting as signed by Lieutenant Jeffrey Farina and Sergeant Michael Schultz. Would you say that that's an accurate statement?
Correct.
So just for the record, the internal investigation, that review that you received from Attorney Safran's office, he did not receive it after sometime around April 2017, correct?
Yes.
And going back to Exhibit 62, do you have that, Jay Anderson's internal investigation?
Yes.
If we look at the cover letter or the cover sort of date, it is dated January 10th, 2018. So this was a year and a half after Jay Anderson's shooting, correct?
Yes.
So according to at least this attachment, this internal document with the attached email had to have been created after January 10th, 2018. Is that accurate, do you think?
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah, I know.
I
I'm sorry,
don't really
Judge.
need her to test. The affidavit speaks for itself. I'm happy to take judicial notice of it. Mr. Conkle is a respected member of the bar. And just for those who are unaware, he was a law partner with Mr. Saffron at the time of his passing. So I mean, you can do this however you want, but I think the affidavit speaks for itself, and I'm prepared to take judicial notice of it.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor.
Well, we
I would
want to
like
hear it,
just point
Judge.
one thing with this document. If we can go to page 681 of the internal investigation of Jay Anderson, it's highlighted in yellow. Are you at the page?
Yes.
Okay. If you go to the third paragraph, it discusses Antonio Gonzalez, correct?
Yes.
And Antonio Gonzalez was another person that Joseph Mensah shot in July 2015, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I have nothing further.
All right, thank you. You can put your mask on and step down. And then I need to speak to Mr. Bayer and Spotley in chambers for a moment, please. Then we'll resume the hearing.
All right, while we're on the little break here, if you guys have questions, you can type them in the chat. Why don't you like him? He's pretty fair. He's grouchy today, though. No, he's been fair throughout this entire hearing so far, and he's picked up on some very crucial testimony. And he's already chastised Wauwatosa Police Department for investigating this shooting when they weren't supposed to. He was pretty pissed when he was hearing about 19 Wauwatosa officers conducting investigation even days after the shooting. But he does seem grouchy today compared to the other days. I wouldn't think anything like that would be the cause.
And my name is Chris, I'm calling from Volusia County Heroes Court. I'm calling to see if the terms of reference have returned to the office yet. Sure, the judge wants her to call.
So if you guys, if this is your first time watching this hearing, this is day 3.
Phone number is
We did
478.
write 2 very detailed articles that are on the Never.Stop.Voices website. I'll link them here. I've already linked them, but I'll link them again. So this is Article 1 from day 1. Then the second article from day 2 is this one. We did live stream day 2. It is on the Never.Stop.Voices YouTube channel. So you can go back and watch that. Day 1, we were actually at the courthouse. Yeah, it could be that Attorney Bayer was late. That might be. There's been some last minute filings. Tosa's playing games with records that they were already court ordered to hand over unredacted. And we live streamed a hearing the other day that was kind of last minute, so it was a little bit ghetto on how we had to live stream it. But over the weekend, the judge was supposed to get those documents. It's called an in-camera review, where the judge looks at it first, and then if he approves the documents, then Kim Motley is able to look at them. So I'm not entirely sure what happened with that. But this morning he was talking about some last minute filings. There's a motion to dismiss now, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, so this is, so in short, Joseph Mensah is a former Wauwatosa police officer, shot and killed 3 people in a 5-year period. Antonio Gonzalez was first. He was having a mental health crisis. Jay Anderson was second. He was asleep in his car. That's what this case is. And then Alvin Cole was the third one. Mensah has since resigned, and he's now a Waukesha County sheriff. In the Jay Anderson situation, so just like we're seeing in all these other police shootings where, you know, there's all these reports and investigations that are taken, and then that stuff gets handed over to the district attorney. They review everything, and then, you know, in most cases, we're seeing that there's no charges filed towards the officer. With this John Doe hearing, this has never happened in Wisconsin. This is where an attorney can file for a John Doe hearing. They present evidence to the judge to see if there is probable cause to actually charge the officer. And what we're finding out is that Wauwatosa conducted investigation. So here in Wisconsin, if the shooting agency, they can't conduct their own investigation per Wisconsin law. And that goes back to a Michael Bell shooting that happened in Kenosha. So 19 different Wauwatosa officers investigated. There was some evidence tampering. They did not hand over all of the investigative reports to the DA. Milwaukee was supposed to be the investigative agency that was in charge. And a lot of what we're seeing is that reports that Wauwatosa wrote up, Milwaukee just copied Tosa's reports. There was not a thorough investigation done on this shooting. Wauwatosa listed that Joseph Mensah followed department policy. That's already been exposed that he violated department policy in this entire situation multiple times. His statements are inconsistent. It showed where it's pretty suggestive that Wauwatosa showed Mensah some evidence to help him along with his statements, because he was giving statements to information that he would not have known. The chief, so there was this big thing about Chief Barry Weber coming and testifying. He filed a motion to quash his subpoena, claiming that he had no knowledge pertinent to this case, which is ridiculous. But an internal document showed that he was either down at the medical examiner's office reviewing Jay Anderson's body, or he was shown reports. So essentially, Chief Weber has lied. They claim that Jay Anderson reached for a gun, which is why Mensah shot him. Video shows that he didn't reach for the gun. The direction of the bullets in his head and body also show that he didn't reach. And we're finding out too that even though the pistol was on the passenger seat, the clip with the bullets was found in the back seat. So the gun wasn't even loaded.
Oh, yes. Is this on 70 as well? You might be fully right.
So this is exposing a lot of corruption with Tosa, but also exposing why these DAs are not filing charges against these officers, because
When you have a moment.
a lot of these documents don't end up going to the DA.
That's good. Okay.
So, and not to say obviously that every department is corrupt, but like this is really showing how when you have the shooting agency, another department comes in to act as the investigative agency, that it's really not an independent investigation, that they're working hand in hand. The investigations are not really done the right way. With this case, you know, same as all the other ones, Jay Anderson is immediately criminalized, even though he was breaking no laws. Out here, this is a really important case for Wisconsin.
How do you normally open up your flash drive stuff?
So I will warn you guys, on the last hearing, we did see some very graphic medical examiner photos. Last hearing, I knew they were coming. This hearing, I have no idea if any of those types of images are going to be shown. I should be able to tell by how they're talking, so I'll try to warn you guys. So if you don't want to see that type of stuff, we'll do our best to give you a heads up so you can turn your head or click off for a minute. But they have shown very graphic.
Right off the record, council's
Thanks.
been provided with a couple more documents this morning and is in the process of printing those off. And once that occurs, then we're going to resume the hearing.
Nathan? It is password protected.
See, so Attorney Motley, she's just getting documents now that she should have received months ago.
We're off the record, right, Judge?
Yeah.
Do you recall if there was a password that came with that cover letter on there by chance?
So, and in the 2 articles that we wrote, they're a little lengthy, but they're extremely detailed.
Oh, yeah. No, I get it.
Like I said, we did live stream the second day of the hearing, and that's up on our YouTube channel.
Better drink some more coffee here. Step behind no more.
Thank you. Put that in. Okay.
Just return that letter to me when you're done.
Okay.
Yeah, this case is a little difficult for me. You know, a lot of the cases I'm, you know, kind of removed from, and with this case, because it's happened here, following this very closely. This is Linda and Jay Anderson, Sr. So that's Jay Anderson Jr.'s parents. I've seen them multiple times at events. They've marched. I've spoken with them multiple times. And then listening to the details of this case, it's like,
This morning, the other.
holy Christ, like this kid should not have died. Like, this is definitely one where,
Thank you.
in my opinion, police got this wrong 100%. So it's like those are difficult when I'm consistently around the family. We just did like a 2-day kind of celebration for Seville Smith, who was shot and killed out here in Milwaukee. And day 1 we did a march throughout Milwaukee, and then we went to the cemetery. And while we were there, we found out that Jay Anderson was actually buried, like, I don't know, within like 50 feet of Seville Smith. So we got to see Seville's gravesite and Jay Anderson Jr.'s gravesite. So that was a bit difficult of a day. So if you guys are just tuning in, we're kind of on a short break. The judge took Attorney Motley and Attorney Bayer in chambers. Attorney Motley just received documents that she was supposed to have quite some time ago. So there is a GoFundMe set up to help with legal fees and everything. And Mrs. Anderson, I don't know if you guys can see
Gonna
this,
work?
but Mrs. Anderson makes these bracelets, these justice bracelets. They're $5. That GoFundMe is up on the Never.Stop page somewhere.
I'm asking if you get the, mail it, or either mail it.
But yeah, share this stream out. This is a huge case. We have another case coming up again, another court day for former officer Michael Mattioli, who killed Joel Acevedo. So Joel Acevedo is our George Floyd. So that happened before George Floyd. Joel was at a party with a bunch of police officers. He was trying to be a cop, so he was hanging out with a bunch of cops and everything. The party happened in the middle of the pandemic. And at some point in the party, there was some type of scuffle. And the officers put Joel in a chokehold and killed him. Mattioli was off duty, and he was charged with murder. I don't know if I'm going to be doing the Mattioli one, just because I haven't.
It's okay.
I haven't followed that case like this. I've been to a couple of the protests outside. Yeah, let me see if I can find the.
Okay.
So I'll be writing another article on this. Once this hearing is done.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Oh, like I said, they just got documents handed to them, so I'm sure they have to look at that. That's why it's important for these idiot attorneys to hand shit over when they're supposed to.
Assistant counsel was able to scan everything else, their defense counsel.
Thank you. Okay, call your next witness.
All right, here's,
Did you want to take care of the matter that Attorney Bear and I talked about?
Sure. Mr. Bear, why don't you come up to council table, please? Make an appearance.
all right, there's the GoFundMe for the bracelets.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Gonna make an appearance.
Nathan Bear of Corvello Carlson. I'm here with Lieutenant Roy from the Wauwatosa Police Department, who has received a third-party subpoena to appear and give testimony and produce documents today.
Okay, we were in discussions last week about the production of documents, agreements with regard to any protective orders in connection with those documents, and I believe that ultimately the parties resolved the issues, right?
That's correct, Your Honor, but we did want to put on the record for some of the items that I believe aren't available or no longer or don't exist that we asked for in our subpoena.
Okay, why don't you go ahead with that?
Your Honor, in our subpoena, we asked for Officer Joseph Mensah's squad cam video from, I believe it was from 11 p.m. on June 22nd, 2016 until 7:24 a.m., June 23rd, 2016. What we did receive was we received his squad cam video from June 23rd, 2016 from the approximate hours of 3:06 a.m. until approximately 3:13 a.m. So we asked for about 8 hours of video, and we have 4 minutes, a little over 6 minutes of video that we received. And I understand that that squad video does not exist anymore within the Wauwatosa Police Department. In addition to that, we also asked for the Madison School Elementary video.
I think we should go through these
sorry.
one at a time then, just for clarity. It's not clear to me whether or not this was a video that ever existed or whether at some point it ceased to exist and when in relationship to the demand that may have happened. So I suppose if you know the answers to those things, you may wish to make a record in that regard.
Thank you, Your Honor. Again, Nathan Bear on behalf of the Tosa Police Department. What I will say is that the records responsive to the specific item contained in the subpoena that was served on April 8th, 2021 were produced. It's not that anything was destroyed. It's the way that the records existed at the time and were preserved and produced.
Okay, and I'm speaking specifically now with regard to that video request. That's your understanding, Mr. Bear?
That's correct.
Is that the same position you're going to have on all these items?
That's correct.
All right, then why don't you just run through them, Ms. Motley?
With regards, the second item is with regards to the Madison School Elementary video. On the subpoena, we asked for the Madison School Elementary video as it existed on June 22nd, 2016 from 11 p.m. until June 23rd, 2016, 4 a.m. What we received was the Madison Elementary School video from 1 a.m. until 3:30 a.m. on June 23rd, 2016.
Okay. And again, your view is, or your position is?
The records that were in the possession of the Wauwatosa Police Department as custodian under Wisconsin Open Records Law were produced that were responsive to this particular subpoena that was issued on April 8th as well.
Go ahead.
And Your Honor, I've never seen the entirety of the Madison School video from 11 p.m. until 4 a.m. So, I do accept what's the representations of counsel.
Well, I do too. I mean, that doesn't really answer the question as to, number one, did they exist? Number two, for how long? Number three, was something done to eliminate their existence, or is this something that was maybe ran on a loop of some sort and so automatically erased? I anticipate that those might be questions that you have for members of the Wauwatosa Police Department. So I think Mr. Bayer here at this time is just responding to what he was able to get possession of based upon the date of the request, correct?
That's a fair representation.
All right, go ahead.
And Your Honor, those were the two records that we wanted to make a record of today.
Okay.
No, I did.
And there were
I said
numerous
Jesus
other
Christ.
records that
Sorry.
the two of you worked out agreements on and ultimately forwarded stipulations and protective orders for the court's signature. Is that an accurate statement?
That's correct, and we've agreed with the protective order that was forwarded to the court yesterday.
Your Honor, if I might just add for the sake of clarity, there's actually two protective orders that were executed by the court, and one was made or requested on behalf of an attorney for former Officer Mensah that related to some of the psychological records in his personnel file. The second protective order was mutually agreed upon between myself and Attorney Montley that applied to a number of subset of the records that were produced in response to the April 7th, 2021 subpoena that was issued on the Wauwatosa Police Department. And there was a number of different reasons for those that are enumerated in the order, but for the record, as long as we were here, I just wanted to make a distinction between the protective order that was requested on behalf of Mr. Mensah and then the one that we agreed upon as a separate order.
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay. And again, some of those were informal conferences with the court, which happens in many cases. And as I said earlier, I understand that passions are very high with regard to this case, and that was quite evident last week when I dealt with counsel. But to their credit, they have really committed themselves to the task at hand and worked well together to reach a resolution, which I believe is reasonable for all concerned. So I want to commend both of you for we could say bouncing back from our original interactions and really ending on a productive note. So thank you for that. Anything further with regard to Mr. Bayer and his representation?
Your Honor, sorry.
Oh, please go ahead.
Your Honor, I believe that we both have mutually agreed to withdraw our motions for contempt.
That's true. And I have nothing further. Thank you, Judge.
Okay. Withdrawal of those motions is granted. So with that, we're prepared to resume testimony?
Yes, please.
All right, thank you.
Your Honor, if I can call Lieutenant Joseph Roy to the stand, please.
Sure. And you know what?
While we're waiting for him, so the big deal with that Madison school video that they were asking from 12 to 4 is that Mensah claimed something happened
I do.
prior to him meeting Jay Anderson, and he wasn't even in the park.
Dayton, spell your first and last name.
Joseph Roy. Joseph-Roy.
This is the public information officer
Now,
that I deal with
Lieutenant
too.
Roy, just to be, so I'm clear, your proper rank is lieutenant, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. With regards to the Jay Anderson shooting, you were part of the investigation of that shooting, is that not correct?
I assisted with a neighborhood canvass.
Okay. What I'd like to do, just to help you out with your testimony, is present to you what's already been marked as Exhibit 15, which is your 8-page report. 1 second.
Now, according to Wisconsin law, Lieutenant Roy should not have conducted any investigation. So you guys understand that. The shooting agency is only supposed to preserve the scene. That is it.
We have one.
Oh, you have it? Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry, I just want to make sure. Now, Lieutenant Roy, with regards to your investigation, I just really wanted to put things on the record for you, and I wanted you to have the assistance of your report in order to do that. So according to your report, you indicated that Detective Lieutenant James Mastrocola assigned you to perform a canvass related to the shooting at Madison Park. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And just for the record, Detective Mastrocola, who does he work for?
Lieutenant Mastrocola is retired.
Who did he work for? Sorry.
On this day,
Yes.
the Wauwatosa Police Department.
Okay.
Can you give the court reporter a spelling, please?
Sorry. Detective Lieutenant James Mastrocola, James, James, Mastrocola, Mastrocola. Now, could you please describe for the court what is performing a canvass? Better question, sorry. Could you please describe for the court what canvass you performed as it relates to this investigation?
Sure. According to my report, I responded to.
Well, let me interrupt you, Lieutenant. The preference here is testimony from memory. Now, if you can't do that, then we have your refresher recollection. I know she gave you the report, but our preference here is if you have a independent recollection that you offer that in your testimony, okay?
Yes, sir. No problem, Your Honor. So I was assigned to see if there were any residents at Luther Manor who may have seen or heard anything that occurred in the park.
And by residents, what do you mean by that? Were there houses, apartments? Where were you doing the canvass?
Luther Manor.
What is Luther Manor?
It's a retirement home, kind of a assisted care facility, kind of mixed type. It's apartment buildings.
Mm-hmm. And based on your recollection, did you talk to any of the residents at Luther Manor?
I did talk to a few people.
Okay. And based on your recollection, did you ask them if they had heard or seen anything with regards to what happened at Madison Park at 3:06 a.m.?
Something similar to that.
Do you recall if anyone heard or saw anything?
I'd have to read the report to be sure.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd ask the court to allow him to refresh his memory and to refer to the court, to the report.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way I'd like to do this, and take as long as you need to refresh yourself, but once you've done so, why don't you turn the report upside down and let her know you're ready.
Yes, sir.
See, with the amount of stuff that Kim has exposed, I've exposed, Isaiah has exposed, these cops need to be really, really cautious about what they say. They're definitely trying to cover their ass right now. This entire department is so corrupt. Like, not even just with this case, but so much. There's so much that we've all exposed with this department.
All right, sir.
Go ahead.
Now, do you recall, based on your canvassing of the area, when you spoke to residents at Luther Manor, if anyone saw or heard anything that they shared with you?
At least 2 residents report hearing something.
Okay. And did you write that in your report?
I did.
Do you recall, based on your canvassing of Luther Manor, if anyone saw anything in relation to your canvassing?
I do not believe so.
Okay. Now, with regards to those that had heard something, do you recall if you shared any of this information with any Milwaukee Police Department investigators?
As I sit here today, I don't recall if I did personally. It's filed in my police report.
Can you move a little closer to the microphone, please, Lieutenant?
Sorry, Your Honor.
So you don't recall personally sharing this information with Milwaukee Police Department?
As I sit here today, I do not recall.
Do you recall sharing this information with Detective Lieutenant Mastrocola?
I wrote it in my police report.
Well, just so I can get an understanding, with regards to your investigation after the shooting, you wrote in your police report. After you write in your police report, where does that document go?
It's approved by a supervisor.
Do you recall who approved your police report?
I do not.
Okay. Do you recall who your supervisor was at that point in time?
Detective Lieutenant Mastrocola.
Okay. Was Chief Barry Weber also your supervisor at that point in time?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you recall sharing this information with Chief Weber?
No.
Okay. But as far as you know, when you write a report, it would go to your supervisors and it's up to them to approve it. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, ma'am. That's fair.
Okay. And after they approve it, then where does the report go? Well, where should this report have gone?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
After your supervisors approved your investigative report with regards to your canvassing as it relates to the J. Anderson shooting, and they approve it, do you know where your report then goes?
It stays in our records management system until it's needed.
So it doesn't go to the Milwaukee Police Department who is conducting the investigation?
I didn't send it there.
Okay. And is it typical for an officer involved shooting? Is that the natural protocol as you're describing that? If you're involved in the investigation at that point in time, you would write the report, it gets approved by your supervisor, it goes in your system, and it may or may not go to the Milwaukee Police Department.
No, it would go to the lead investigating agency.
Who would send it there?
Either the detective lieutenant or whoever he or she assigned.
Okay. And they would just automatically do that?
Yes.
Do you know if this report went to the investigative agency with the Milwaukee Police Department?
I would assume it did. I don't have any personal recollection of that.
But it should have.
It should have.
And when should it have gone to them?
That's hard to say.
Should it have gone to them pretty much immediately after your supervisor approves your report?
Timing of these things, these are massive investigations. It's hard to nail down the timing.
But certainly it should go to them before any potential charging decisions are made for an open investigation. Is that a fair statement?
I would think so.
Okay. And as you stated, there was no one within the Milwaukee Police Department that reached out to you to discuss your investigation that you recall.
If I can't recall right now.
If someone within the Milwaukee Police Department had reached out to you, would you have written a report about that?
Not necessarily.
Okay. How long have you been with the Wauwatosa Police Department?
20 years.
Okay. And within that 20 years, just out of curiosity, have you ever fired your weapon while you've been working?
Yes.
How many times?
Oh, I couldn't count. Thousands.
Have you ever fired your weapon? You fired your weapon thousands of times.
I don't think he's talking about the practice range, Lieutenant.
Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Like she's talking about connection with service calls, am I right?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't understand.
So, could you please answer the question?
Could you repeat the question?
Sorry. As it relates to service calls, not when you're shooting on the range, things like that, when you're working, not while you're shooting on the range, how many times have you fired your weapon within the 20 years of being a law enforcement officer?
At another person, never.
Okay. Thank you. Now, do you recall doing research as it relates to critical incidents in Wauwatosa?
I do.
And you wrote a report on August 24th, 2020, correct?
I believe a memo, but yes.
Oh, sorry, a memo. And that memo went to Chief Weber, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And why did you write that memo?
I was asked to do that for the Attorney Biskupik investigation. My understanding at the time was Attorney Biskupik wanted a synopsis of all officer-involved shootings.
Okay. And based on your memo that you wrote for August 24th, 2020, you were looking at critical incidents from January 2010 until August 24th, 2020. Is that correct?
That sounds correct.
And Your Honor, just for the record, I am referring to exhibit number 4.
Good.
Now, as it relates to this memo, within that little over a 10-year time period, how many police-involved fatalities have the city involving an officer has Wauwatosa had within that 10-year time period?
0.
Fatalities?
0. Come on, clown.
And what were those 3 officer-involved police shooting fatalities that happened from January 2010 until August 24th, 2020?
It's just the 3 by Mensah.
As far as the
Jesus Christ.
decedent?
Yes.
This guy's pissing me off. I can't watch
Gonzalez,
this.
G. Anderson Jr., Alvin Cole.
So within that time period, there were no other officer-involved fatalities within the Wauwatosa Police Department other than those 3 incidents. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall before January 2010, when was the last officer-involved fatality in the city of Wauwatosa?
I don't recall. I'd have to search. I don't know, ma'am.
Okay. Do you recall in your research how far back you looked?
Whatever the first date is there.
Okay. But you've been with the Wauwatosa Police Department for 10 years.
20 years.
20.
Or sorry, 20 years. Sorry. And in that 20 years, do you recall, just based on your own recollection, any other officer-involved fatalities in the city of Wauwatosa other than the 3 that you mentioned?
0.
Not from gunfire.
Okay. Thank you. Now, with regards to your synopsis, well, I think nothing further on that. Now, as your role as a lieutenant with the Wauwatosa Police Department, are you also in charge of open records requests?
I am. My division handles those.
Okay. And how long have you dealt with open records requests for the Wauwatosa Police Department?
Since March of 2020.
So relatively new.
Yes, ma'am.
Wow. I'm sorry, I gave you a lot of open records requests within that time period.
You did.
Are you enjoying it so far?
No, sir.
Now, as far as your job as dealing with open records requests, you personally are not the custodian of the records. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So what is your job with regards to dealing with open records requests?
To receive the request, acknowledge the request, interpret the request, locate or direct that the records be located, perform the balancing test as required under state law in order to determine what, if anything, needs to be redacted, to either perform or verify the redactions, and finally produce the record and a letter indicating why anything may or may not be redacted.
Okay. So you're basically the designated person that handles the request, but it's not up to you to necessarily, pick it. Well, let me take that back. You're the designated person that deals with open records requests, correct?
That is correct. I have a team of people, but I'm in charge.
Right. And also, part of the reason why you're here today is because we served you with subpoena, and based on your duties, you're the designated person that deals with documents and files and recordings and whatnot. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you recall me requesting Officer Mensah's complete personnel file?
I do recall.
Okay. And do you recall sending me a Dropbox link with his personnel file?
I do.
And do you recall, if you don't mind, and if the court doesn't mind, I'd like to show Lieutenant Roy the email that he sent me dated August 5th, 2020, and just want to see if this is familiar to him.
Go ahead.
And I've already marked this as Exhibit 66.
Okay.
Thank you.
Lieutenant Roy, does that email look familiar to you?
It does.
Okay. And could you please describe for the court what that email basically is?
This is an email I sent you in regards to records you had requested. This is indicating that partial fulfillment of your records is included in a Dropbox link. We use Dropbox to transmit files.
Okay, thank you.
Please keep that microphone up close to you, Lieutenant.
Sorry, Your Honor.
Thank you. And do you recall sending me an email or me asking for clarification regarding specifically as it relates to Mensah's personnel file and what I received?
I don't recall the exact email, but you and I have emailed back and forth a number of times.
Your Honor, if with the court's permission, I'd like to present to Lieutenant Roy emails that he sent me to refresh his memory.
I mean, what do you believe the relevance is here?
I believe the relevance is with regards to Mensah's personnel file. I would just want Lieutenant Roy to acknowledge that he did provide to us Joseph Roy's complete personnel file, aside from a few things that he outlined in the email.
Officer Mensah's complete personnel.
Sorry, Officer Mensah's complete personnel file, other than a few things as Lieutenant Roy outlined in the email.
All right, go ahead.
And Your Honor, I've already marked this as Exhibit 67.
Okay.
So real quick, the thing with the gun-related deaths, there's only been 3 in the last 10 years in Wauwatosa. Joseph Mensah made multiple comments
Thank you.
on a Dan O'Donnell show, and then in statements that his fellow officers have
I'll give you a
fired
minute to look it over.
their weapon more times than he has and had worse incidents than he has, and that's not true. So there's been 0 fatalities in the last 10 years, other than the 3 by Mensah.
Okay, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Now, according to Exhibit 67, on August 18th, 2020, or excuse me, August 19th, 2020, I asked you, just to be clear with what was in the Dropbox, do we have Mensah's complete personnel file, disciplinary records, background investigative files, performance evaluations, and internal investigations files, aside from his personal health history and biographical information, and you agreed that's what we had. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So just to be clear, on August 19th, you confirmed that essentially we have Officer Joseph Mensah's complete personnel file, other than any personal health history and other than any biographical information. Is that correct?
Correct. Correct.
So in terms of biographical information, we're talking about address, phone, date of birth, things like that. That's not something that you handed over to me.
Correct.
And in terms of personal health history, we're talking about, for instance, Officer Mensah's medical records. That's not something you handed over to me. Is that correct?
Correct. Anything dealing with Officer Mensah's health.
Okay. I have nothing further. Thank you.
Lieutenant, I'm just looking at your report here from when you canvassed the Luther Manor, and that took place, according to the report, approximately 6:23:16 at approximately 6 a.m. I know that from prior testimony that the investigation was handed over rather quickly to MPD. And my question is, are there protocols in place so that define what can be pursued, what should not be pursued once an investigation is turned over to another agency?
Well, as Your Honor knows, the state law governs how those investigations are currently conducted. I am aware that at the time of that investigation, there was a memorandum of understanding between the municipalities in Milwaukee County that discussed those types of procedures and what members of quote unquote involved agencies were allowed to do. I recall from the briefing and the fair number of investigations I completed that members of, again, an involved agency, so that would be the agency that employed the officer involved in the shooting in this instance, were allowed to participate in the investigation in those more ancillary features, knocking on doors, those kinds of things, and should something relevant or critical be found, that information be turned over.
And so things such as the canvassing that you did on about June 23rd, those would be activities that you would consider to be within that memorandum of understanding?
To the best of my knowledge, the way I was trained and taught, Your Honor, absolutely. Those were the types of things, especially that canvas took a large number of people a large number of investigators to complete. It was a large scene.
So I don't recall exactly what term you used, if it was peripheral or ancillary, but in other words, a role where you're basically helping out the lead investigative agency almost from very shortly after
what the fuck?
The shooting. And I believe there was also testimony that some of these things were being done while Milwaukee Police Department was en route to take the investigation over. I mean, with things like going through the pockets of the decedent, handling a potential evidentiary firearm, would those things be things that you would also consider as ancillary to an investigation?
No, Your Honor. Any type of evidentiary type of, in my experience, any type of evidence handling would be handled primarily by under the direction of the main investigating agency. I think the key there is that the officers were still handling the situation as it was evolving, and that officers are not allowed to declare somebody legally dead. That's not our job. So there was no decedent at the time those things happened. So those officers were still dealing with the situation that had presented itself to them.
And I'm sure you've heard some of the things that were done on scene. Were those things that were done, any of those things done under your direction?
No, sir.
Would you have, if you had been consulted in advance, would you have given the go-ahead for searching the vehicle, searching the decedent, things like that?
No,
prior
sir.
to MPD arriving?
No, sir.
Additional questions?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Now, you referenced the memorandum of understanding that sort of is operated under as it relates to officer-involved shootings?
At the time.
At the time, correct. And so we know that there was a memorandum of understanding and standard operating procedures that were created in 2014. Is that what you're referring to?
I believe that's the date on them. I only recently was provided the document, which I provided to you. And I have not reviewed it thoroughly, but I do recall it.
Mm-hmm. And just to be clear, as the judge said, when you performed the canvassing on June 23rd, 2016, you did that at the direction of your supervisor at the time, Detective Mastrocola with the Wauwatosa Police Department. Is that accurate?
Detective Lieutenant, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Detective Lieutenant, I'm sorry. And that occurred at around 6 a.m. Is that accurate?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you aware at that time that Milwaukee had taken over the investigation 2 hours prior?
I must have been aware that Milwaukee was the lead agency. I can't recall if I was aware of how long they had been on scene for.
But irregardless of that, you were taking orders from your supervisor, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, according to the standard operating procedures that's dated June 30th, 2014, it states that for the canvass for additional witnesses, it's an important task, one that's likely to be delegated to the involved agency by the lead investigator. As far as you know, do you know if Milwaukee Police Department had delegated to you the task of canvassing the area?
I wouldn't say that they did, because that's what we did.
But did you know that?
The question is if you recall a consultation where they basically gave you the go-ahead to do that.
I was not involved in that consultation.
So as far as you know, you don't know if Milwaukee delegated to Detective Lieutenant Mastrocola the task of canvassing the area.
Well, I would assume they would, because we did.
But do you know that?
The question is only what you know.
I don't know.
Okay. And you didn't see any documents or anything. You don't know that, correct?
Correct.
And as far as what you don't know if Milwaukee also tasked Wauwatosa to talk to any potential citizen witnesses. Is that correct?
I do not know.
Okay, thank you. And that also is something that's outlined in the standing operating procedures, that the lead investigator is to ensure that all citizen witnesses are interviewed and that the interviews are properly documented.
I don't have it in front of me. If you're reading it from the page, then I will agree with you.
Okay, thank you. Your Honor, what I'd like to do is I'd like to submit to the court Exhibit 80, which is the Memorandum of Understanding with the standard operating procedures of Milwaukee County for officer-involved death investigations.
Right, we'll receive that.
Okay.
Anything further?
No, I have nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant. You can step down. Please
Thank
put your mask back on.
Thank you, Your Honor.
He's free to go, right?
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
How you doing there? We do one more witness for the break? Okay. All right, call your next witness.
Yeah.
So that testimony about Wauwatosa handling evidence
Get on the microphone, will you, please?
is super crucial.
I was just wondering if, can you confirm that Lieutenant Joseph Roy of the Wauwatosa Police Department is formally released from his subpoena to appear and testify today, and he's free to go?
I thought I just did that, but
Okay,
I'll try and do it in an official way now.
Okay, I just mentioned that the witness could step down. I just wanted to make sure he wasn't going to be recalled later, that's all.
No, you're right.
Okay.
Ollie?
Your Honor,
He wants to know if he's released for good, if you plan to recall him later.
I don't plan on recalling him later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bear.
Your Honor, if I can have just 2 minutes.
Sure.
Let's see.
So we released footage on the Never.Stop.Voices YouTube channel of Wauwatosa on scene recovering the gun from the car, which they were not
Take a
supposed
break
to
after the
do.
next witness.
So there's two videos up on our YouTube channel of the shooting incident, and then it's like two different angles. I know we get restreamed a lot, so if you guys are watching this through a restream, you are watching Never Stop Media. Just come to the source. Stop watching this through a restream.
That's the jury. Is he off this week? Moved across the hall. What went wrong there?
Oh, it's probably the birds outside my window.
Oh, I see. Time to get a fresh view, is that it? Okay. All right.
Ready, Your Honor.
All right, call your next witness.
Your Honor, I'd like to call Chief Barry Weber to the stand, please.
Get your popcorn. This is what we've all been waiting for.
Morning, Chief. You can remove your mask while you testify.
Thank you, sir.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please be seated, state and spell your first and last name.
Share this out.
My name is Barry, B-A-R-R-Y, Weber, W-E-B-E-R.
Now, Chief Weber, how long have you been the chief for the Wauwatosa Police Department?
The end of this month will be 31 years,
Okay. And when did you first start with Wauwatosa Police Department?
May 29th, 1990.
And about how many officers do you supervise?
We were at full strength, 96.
On June 23rd, 2016, were you working as a chief for the Wauwatosa Police Department?
Yes.
And are you a supervisor to Joseph Mensah?
Ultimately, yes.
Okay. As the chief of the Wauwatosa Police Department, are you part of any associations?
Yes.
What associations are you a part of?
The International Association of Chiefs of Police, Milwaukee County Law Enforcement Executive Association, Wisconsin Police Executive Group, Wauwatosa Rotary Club, Wauwatosa Chamber of Commerce, FBI National Academy Associates.
Okay. And on June 23rd, 2016, well, actually, how long have you been part of these associations? I'm sorry, I should ask you that first. Could you give, like, how long for each?
Just about almost the 31 years with all of them.
Okay. Now, what I'd like to show you is what's been marked as Exhibit 65. you win. Sorry. Do you recall receiving a letter from DA Kent Laverne dated December 5th, 2016 regarding the J. Anderson Jr. shooting?
Yes,
And in that letter, Kent Laverne indicated that he was refusing to charge Joseph Mensah in relation to that shooting. Is that correct?
he declined, correct.
Okay. And you received a copy of this, right?
Yes,
And do you recall also receiving a letter, or at least seeing a copy of a letter from the Department of Justice that was sent to Attorney Safran?
I believe it was sent. I don't remember the letter, though.
Okay. Now, in that letter, and Your Honor, I've marked it as Exhibit 64,
Okay.
with regards to the Department of Justice letter that's dated February 16, 2016, do you recall the Department of Justice saying that they've been reviewing the investigative materials that the DA's office gave them, and they are declining to essentially move forward with, as I interpret it, intentional homicide charges against Officer Joseph Mensah?
I don't remember the letter.
Your Honor, if it's possible, I'd like to present to Chief Weber the letter to refresh his memory.
Yeah, go ahead.
Weber's pissed.
Let him know when you've had a chance to read it, Chief.
It's Milwaukee.
I've read it.
Now, based on this letter dated February 16th, 2016, Exhibit 64, the first sentence is that the federal authorities have been reviewing investigative materials regarding the fatal shooting of J. Anderson by Wauwatosa Police Officer Joseph Mensah on June 23rd, 2016, in order to determine if there's a basis for prosecuting Officer Mensah for a civil rights violation under federal law. Is that correct?
That's what it says, yes.
Okay. And based, as far as you know, has the Department of Justice ever spoken to you with regards to the shooting of J. Anderson Jr.?
Not that I recall, and I don't remember ever seeing this letter either until just now.
Okay. And has the district attorney's office ever spoken to you with regards to the J. Anderson shooting?
After I got that letter from Ken Laverne dated in December of 2016, that would be it.
Okay. But prior to them making the decision to not issue charges against Joseph Mensah in December 2016, the district attorney's office of Milwaukee County did not communicate with you?
No, they probably, I may have gone to a meeting with the district attorney's office like a week ahead of time before the letter came out, so I knew that it was going to be coming out.
Okay. And with regards to your day-to-day, and just sort of specifically looking at the June 23rd, 2016 time period, how often did you interact with Joseph Mensah?
Joseph was assigned to the late shift, so I don't interact very often with the late shift officers unless I see them in passing.
Mm-hmm. How often did you communicate with Joseph Mensah around June 23rd, 2016?
I saw him that morning at the scene, but prior to that, I had not talked to him for a while.
So you saw him the morning of June 23rd, 2016.
That's correct.
Do you recall what time?
Probably would have been around 3:45 or 4 a.m.
Okay. And when you saw him at 3:45, 4 a.m., did he say anything to you?
No, I asked him how he was doing, and he said he was fine. He was in the back of a squad car.
Okay.
At the
But
scene.
within that brief conversation, he didn't talk about the incident at all. Is that a fair statement?
That's true, nor would I ask him.
Okay. And did you hear him talking about the incident with anybody while you were there?
No.
Okay. Now as the chief with the Wauwatosa Police Department, and just focusing on June 23rd, 2016, what are some of your duties?
Well, I've always described my job as not to run the police department, but to see that the department runs well. All the officers, they all have supervisors, sergeants, the officers report to the sergeants, who report to the lieutenants, who report to the captains, and the captains report to me.
Okay. And so are you the primary policymaker with the Wauwatosa Police Department?
Yes.
Okay. And you've written different policies in terms of, how officers are supposed to behave, or how they're supposed to work.
I have drafted policies over the years, but also now if I need policies, many times I will delegate that to a lieutenant or somebody, and they will write the policy out, and then we'll all take a look at it, and then I have final approval of it.
Okay. In August of 2016, Officer Mensah received an award, a Medal of Valor. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you say so, yes.
Okay. Why did he get a Medal of Valor?
Because of the way he's conducted himself as a police officer.
Did he get a Medal of Valor as it relates to how he conducted himself with the Antonio Gonzalez shooting?
I believe that would have been the one.
Okay. In August 2016, when he received that award, he was currently being investigated for the Jay Anderson shooting. Is that correct?
He was on administrative leave for the shooting. That is correct.
But the shooting was being investigated during that time period when he got the award.
Yes.
Do you recall if you're the one that recommended him for that award?
No, I do not make those recommendations. I have a final say-so on them.
Do you recall when you made the final say-so for him to receive that award?
Probably a month or so ahead of that. I'm not sure when that was presented to me.
Okay.
I'm sorry, ahead of what, Chief?
I'm sorry.
Ahead of what?
A recommendation made to me about whether or not they would get who gets the awards.
Okay.
So the ceremony was August 2016. Typically, how far in advance do you get the recommendation for those who received awards like this?
Usually several months.
Okay. So you don't recall when the recommendation for Mensah to receive this award came to you?
I do not.
Do you recall when you approved this recommendation for him to receive the Medal of Valor award?
No, but when I did approve it, I would approve all the other ones too.
Okay. As the policymaker for the Wauwatosa Police Department, you also can rescind your recommendations for awards, correct?
Correct.
Did you do that?
No,
Why not?
I felt he was deserving of what happened in that Gonzalez shooting, which he was recommended.
Irregardless of the fact that he was currently under investigation for the Jay Anderson
It's a
shooting.
separate incident.
And you didn't think to delay his award?
We were talking about the Gonzalez incident, so no, that was a separate incident.
Okay, let's talk for fitness for duty. Let's talk about that. So what is the Wauwatosa Police Department policy as it relates to determining when an officer is fit to come back to work?
In the case of an officer-involved shooting, an officer's involved in administrative leave, and if he's cleared to come back, before we would allow him to come back, I would send him to a psychologist that we use to determine if, in that person's professional opinion, that he's able to return.
And then that psychologist communicates to you whether or not that person is able to return to work.
Yes.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, you've heard Lieutenant Roy's testimony, and he gave his memo to you as relates to critical incidents. Do you recall before January 2010 when a Wauwatosa officer was involved in a officer-involved fatal shooting?
Yes.
When was that?
It was sometime before that, but Officer Moldenauer had been involved in a fatal shooting of a person who pointed a rifle at him.
Okay. And you don't remember what year that was?
I don't.
Okay. And what happened with he was involved in a fatal shooting and it resulted in the suspect being shot?
Suspect was deceased, and the officer was found that he was acting in self-defense.
Okay. So with regards to your fit for duty policy, is that a written policy?
It may be included in some other policy. I'm not sure. I don't know if we have a fitness for duty policy. It's standalone.
Do you know what other policy your fitness for duty is included in?
It might be in the use of force policy. I'm not sure.
Now, you indicated you're part of the International Associations of Chiefs, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you've been part of that association for 31 years.
Actually, since 1984, that predated Wauwatosa.
Okay, so you've been part of the International Association of Chiefs since 1984,
Yes,
for more than 31 years.
yes, I'm a life member.
Okay, so what's the standard put out by the International Associations of Chiefs of Police for fitness for duty evaluations?
I don't know what their standard is. I don't.
You don't know what it is?
No.
You don't know do you know if Wauwatosa Police Department follows the standard put out for fitness for duty evaluations as delineated by the International Association of Chiefs?
You know, as a member of the International Association of Chiefs, the IACP, as it's known, thinks they're the expert on everything. One size doesn't fit all for every organization, so I don't necessarily look at what IACP does. I look at what's best for our organization.
So what size fits your organization as relates to fitness for duty
Well,
evaluation?
as I said, like in a critical incident, or if somebody witnessed a tragic loss of a child or a bizarre incident or whatever, and I felt that they needed to have some more counseling, we do send people for counseling. If I think that there's something more that needs to be done, and I'm just not sure about what their ability or what their fitness is, I'll send them to get that opinion.
Okay. So was it your opinion that Joseph Mensah need to be evaluated after the Antonio Gonzalez shooting?
Well, because it was a fatality involved and he used his firearm, yes, I wanted fitness for duty for him.
And typically when the psychologist communicates with you to determine whether or not an officer is fit for duty, how do they do they send you an email? Do they send you a letter? How does that work?
It can go, usually I get a phone call, and then perhaps a follow-up letter, not always. And I don't ask anything about the officer's abilities as far as mental condition or whatever. It's just like yes or no, because it's not my business to know what their particular mental problems are or any other personal issues they have. I just need to know, are they able to work or can't they work? Just tell me yes or no.
Well, to be fair, a psychologist would not call you up and give you personal medical details of someone, correct? Because they have HIPAA.
Right.
So that phone call would never happen where they would give you that information.
Right. That's never happened. That's what I was trying to say.
Okay, thank you. Now, when they call you and they determine that someone, let's say with regards to Officer Joseph Mensah, right? You never received a phone call after the Antonio Gonzalez shooting that he was fit for duty. Is that correct?
I don't remember.
You never received an email that Joseph Mensah was fit for duty after the Antonio Gonzalez shooting. Is that correct?
Not that I recall.
But typically you would get something in writing to say, yes, he's fit for duty.
Not always in writing, because I've known the psychologist for years, so oftentimes he might just call me and say, he's okay, put him back to work, it's fine.
But Chief, to be fair, Wauwatosa doesn't deal with a lot of officer-involved fatal shootings, correct?
Thankfully, that's true.
Yeah, thankfully that's true. So this isn't a typical situation. Based on your testimony, there was one prior officer that was involved in an officer-involved shooting. You don't recall when that was, before January 2010. So this isn't a typical situation. Is that correct?
Correct.
So it'd be expected that you would want something in writing, especially as it relates to basic standard operating procedures for fitness for duty evaluations.
Well, not necessarily, because in this case, we have a counselor that we send officers to, and then we also have a psychologist that's separate. So if I'm sending them to the counselor and the counselor decides what needs to be done, and I get the psychologist that, as far as I'm concerned, he's okay.
But as a chief policy maker for the Wauwatosa Police Department, don't you have a duty to make sure, an ethical duty, that not only is your officer protected, but that the public is also protected.
Absolutely.
So as a chief policymaker, you wouldn't just rely completely on a psychologist for you to make a determination that an officer like Officer Joseph Mensah was, okay to return back to work.
Well, since I don't have any medical background whatsoever, I would rely on a psychologist or a doctor. If they clear the person, then if they say yes, then I say he's okay to come back.
So you wouldn't look at whether or not he broke any of your policies that you've written for Wauwatosa Police Department. You would 100% rely on a psychologist to tell you that this officer is okay to return to work.
We do an internal investigation on these on shooting incidents too.
And typically, how soon after an incident do you do these internal investigations?
It varies. Oftentimes we wait until the district attorney makes their determination. Because if the district attorney is going to charge the officer, well, then I might as well hold off on the investigation because it's going to be a whole different set of circumstances. So usually I wait.
Do you recall when you did the internal investigation as it relates to Antonio Gonzalez shooting?
I don't know the exact date on that one, and I don't conduct the investigation. I usually assign that to somebody.
So the internal investigation, coupled with a psychologist's recommendation whether or not someone is fit for duty to return to work, you would take both of those things and decide whether or not an officer should go back out on the street.
Most likely, yes.
Okay.
Does that mean that an internal investigation was completed prior to Officer Mensah returning to duty?
I don't have it in front of me, Judge. I can't be sure.
Okay, go ahead.
So you're aware of the affidavit that was signed by Jerome Canto dated November 10th, 2020, Exhibit 63. Attorney Safran asked your office and actually sent you a letter asking for Officer Joseph Mensah's personnel file on April 6, 2017. Do you recall that?
I don't recall it, but it must be true.
Okay. And you soon after sent Joseph Mensah's personnel file to Attorney Safran. Do you recall doing that?
I wouldn't have sent it. I would have delegated to somebody who's in charge of records, but yeah, probably.
Okay. But you would have gave permission or you would have instructed someone under you to have sent the documents to Attorney Safran?
Yes.
Okay. And in the affidavit that was dated, November 10th, 2020, he indicated that Antonio Gonzalez's complete personnel file did not include the internal administrative review of the Antonio Gonzalez shooting.
I'm not sure the question was clear because you said Antonio Gonzalez's personnel file.
That's correct. So just to be clear. So Attorney Safran sends you an open records request around April 2017. You responded to that open records request.
Okay.
According to Attorney Safran's office, there was no internal investigative file as it relates to Antonio Gonzalez that his office received as it relates to Officer Joseph Mensah's personnel file.
I wouldn't know that or not.
Okay. So what that's, to me, demonstrates is that at least in April 2017, the Antonio Gonzalez internal investigation did not exist, or that document was not sent to Attorney Safran's office. Do you know which one happened?
I don't.
Okay. Now, as it relates to let's talk about training. That's okay. We might come back to fitness for duty. Do you recall being deposed on February 25th, 2021 by Attorney Joy Bertram?
Yes.
And in that deposition, you talked about consistency and how important consistency is to the Wauwatosa Police Department and practices and things like that. Could you explain to the court how important consistency is to Wauwatosa police practices?
I don't know what the frame of reference is that I was referring to, but I would like to think that we would act in a consistent manner and enforce the law in a consistent manner.
Just to be clear, and I'm sorry, I'll give you a frame of reference. When you're discussing consistency, you're talking about squad cars and how every squad car in Wauwatosa, the inside of it is exactly the same. Could you please explain that to the court?
In the marked patrol vehicles, they're all set up identical, so the same controls are in the same place. The buttons are the same, so if an officer has to respond to something in the dark, turn on the lights or whatever, it's all, you can go from one car to another and it's all the same.
Okay. And typically, what are some of the weapons that are inside the Wauwatosa police squad car?
Most of the marked cars for patrol have a shotgun in them and or a rifle.
Mm-hmm.
Depending if the officer is involved with this special response team, they might have other equipment of their own that they carry.
Okay. In terms of the shotgun or rifle, is it inside the squad car?
Yes.
And where is it located usually?
There's a rack that's like in between the seats.
In between the front seats?
In between the front seats, yes. Bucket seats. Bucket seats would be in the middle. Overhead.
Okay. I've never been in a squad car, so sorry. Is it in between the front driver's seat to the front passenger
It's
seat?
like overhead. Some of them are mounted different, but they're more overhead now because whenever I've sat in, I always bang my head on it.
Okay.
Because they try to fit everything in there.
Okay. And it's easily accessible to the officer?
Yes.
Okay. Is it locked in or how is it?
Locked in, it's electronic lock.
And how do you unlock it?
There's a special control button that they use to release it.
Okay. And what are the types of equipment that officers have on them? At least Joseph Mensah, what equipment did he have on him on June 23rd, 2016? That's typical to Wauwatosa police officers.
At that time, he would have had his city-owned Glock 40 caliber handgun. I believe he carried several extra magazines with him. He would have handcuffs, pepper spray, taser, a baton. Those would be the weapons.
Mm-hmm. And in looking at your vehicle contacts training, one of the things that was mentioned in the training is sort of a pre-squad check before officers go out on the street. Could you please explain to the court what that is?
Before an officer goes on the street, he has to make sure that all the equipment in his car is actually working. So they usually turn on all the lights to make sure and walk around the car. Make sure there's no visible damage to the car because you don't want to be blamed for something that you didn't do it. Mm-hmm. So make sure the lights work, the siren works, make sure you have a defibrillator in the trunk, make sure your camera works, make sure that there's no other deficiencies with anything.
And based on the vehicle contacts training, if there's anything that does not work, it states that you're supposed to put it on the whiteboard. Is that accurate?
I'm not sure exactly what they use, so the maintenance guys get it. There's a place that they report it, so maintenance takes care of it.
Mm-hmm. And this sort of procedure is something that has been going on how long with the Wauwatosa Police Department, this pre-squad check?
I've been in the business for over 40 years. We've always done pre-squad checks no matter where you're at, so it's been going on forever.
So this is something that would have been required of Officer Mensah on June 22nd, 2016 to do before he went on the street, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And before he went on the street, he would have had to check his, cameras to make sure that they're working, correct?
Yes.
Before he went on the street, he would have had to make sure that his microphone audio recording was functional. Is that correct?
You would think he would, yes.
Okay. Before he went on the street, he would have to make sure that his red and blue lights worked. Is that correct?
Yes.
And typically, how do your red and blue lights, how do you activate that?
There's a switch on the console. It turns them on.
Okay. So you can't activate that remotely as an officer?
No.
Okay. So when, it says that red and blue lights are activating, what does that mean to you?
Somebody's reaching down for the button to turn them on.
Okay. Does it mean that they're on? or that someone's in the process of trying to turn them on?
Activating your lights would mean you're turning them on. Once they're activated, then they're on.
Okay, thank you. So, as it relates to, as far as you know, there was nothing in relation to the squad equipment or the equipment that Officer Mensah was wearing on June 22nd and June 23rd that was not functioning correctly.
Nothing that was brought to my attention, no.
Okay. And, sometimes I assume, even with all the checks, maybe there still is equipment that doesn't work. When that's found out, I assume that after the fact, officers would report that information to someone to fix that. Is that accurate?
True.
Okay. And do you recall that after June 23rd, 2016, if Officer Joseph Mensah communicated to you or anyone else within the Wauwatosa Police Department that, for instance, his squad camera did not work?
I heard that later on.
Mm-hmm. Did he put in a written order about his equipment not functioning correctly?
I don't know if he did.
Okay.
It's typically not something I would look at.
Okay. Do you recall being questioned by Steve Biskubich?
Yes.
You doing all right?
Now, in that testimony that was taken, it's already been marked as Exhibit 1 with the court. In that conversation that happened on September 21st, 2020, do you recall Attorney Steve Biskubich and his colleagues asking you about whether or not Officer Mensah's equipment was functioning on June 23rd, 2016?
I don't remember that one specific, but they asked me so many things. They probably did.
And do you recall in that conversation, you not confirming that Mensah's equipment was malfunctioning?
Probably, yes. I would not have any way of knowing that.
Okay. You would not have any way of knowing what?
That his equipment, whether it was functioning or not functioning, because if it wasn't, he would have reported to his supervisor, not me.
So after the shooting of Jay Anderson, did you do any type of investigation as relates to your subordinate, Officer Joseph Mensah?
When you say investigation, we did a investigation after the district attorney's office declined to file charges. As I said earlier, we'll wait to see if the DA is going to file charges. Then we had the internal investigation started.
You had the internal investigation started after the DA declined to issue charges.
I believe that's when it started.
I'd like to point to you what's already been marked as Exhibit 62. Now, according to Exhibit 62, there is an email, September 2018, where the internal investigation of Jay Anderson was attached to the email. And it was a draft internal investigation report. This was January 2018. Do you recall, and you just testified, that right after the DA's decision, which would have been December 2016, Wauwatosa Police Department did an internal investigation. Do you still think that's accurate?
I'm not sure what you're asking. When was the letter that you're talking about?
The email is dated January 10th, 2018,
Okay.
from Jeffrey Farina to Luke Vedder. And in this email is a draft internal investigation of the Jay Anderson shooting.
Okay.
In this draft, there's also, and this, I'm referring to Exhibit 62. In this draft, there's also four pages that are highlighted regarding the Antonio Gonzalez shooting. It looks like it was cut and pasted from that internal investigation. So my question is, based on this email that's dated January 10th, 2018, it appears that the internal investigation for the J. Anderson shooting didn't start until 2018. Is that an accurate statement? Would you like to look at this?
Sure, I don't know the date.
Your Honor, if it's all right with the court, I'd like to show the chief
Let him see it.
Exhibit 62.
I think it was your words, counsel, with regard to internal investigation right after the DA's decision. I believe the chief has testified a couple times that this is they wait until that's over before they begin anything. And what was the date? You recall offhand, counsel, what the date is on the district attorney's letter declining prosecution?
It was December 16th, 2016, Exhibit 65. Let's see. December 5th, 2016.
Thank you.
No, you want December 5th.
Those fucking clowns.
Okay, I've read this.
So this report was created over a year and a half after the J. Anderson shooting. Is that accurate?
This email certainly is. I don't know if they started drafting the report prior to that or not. I don't know.
But you do know that according to the affidavit of Jerome Conkle that was dated November 10th, 2020, that when they received Officer Joseph Mensah's personnel file in April 2017, that this document was not in there.
What's the question?
Do you know when the internal investigation for the J. Anderson shooting was completed?
I don't know the date, no.
Do you know when the internal investigation for the J. Anderson shooting, when it started?
I wouldn't know exactly because they probably started putting their stuff together once they got all the completed reports and all that, but maybe they didn't give it to me for a few months, I don't know.
Chief, when you say they, who are you referencing?
In this case, Judge, I'm referring to Lieutenant Mike Schultz and Lieutenant Jeff Farina. They were the ones that we assigned to do the internal.
All right, thank you.
Typically, when officers within Wauwatosa Police Department conduct, internal investigations or create reports and things like that, it's important to date when those things happen. Is that correct?
Yes.
So what's the date that's on that internal investigation of the J. Anderson shooting that's up there?
The one that you just gave to me is
Not the email of the report.
the report. I don't see a date on it.
Okay. And as you said, it's important typically for officers to date their reports and date their internal investigation. But there's no report on that, correct?
There's no date on it that I can see.
Is it important also for internal investigations to be, signed off on by officers that are conducting those investigations?
Yes.
Who signed this internal investigation?
This one, there's no signatures.
Whose name is on there?
Farina and Schultz.
Thank you. Now, as it relates to the Antonio Gonzalez investigation, and I'm going to show you if it's okay with the court, Exhibit 61.
What are you looking at for a time frame here on this examination?
What is it now? I think we're nearly done.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Chief, would it be correct to assume that at some point in contemplation of an investigation that you would have met with the two individuals that you indicate were tasked with this investigation and to give them a go-ahead in advance of their work?
Whether I probably would not have done it, the captain would have done that and said, hey, you guys get this done.
And the captain would have done it at your direction?
Actually, he probably would have brought it up to me and said, we need to get this done. I said, go ahead and do it.
You don't have any independent recollection as to when these discussions took place?
No, I don't.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Now, with regards to Exhibit 61 that I just gave you, that's the Antonio Gonzalez internal investigation that was completed. What date does that report say that this investigation was completed? Not the email.
I don't have a date on this report.
Okay. What's the signature? Who's the person that signed this internal investigation of Antonio Gonzalez?
And on this copy, there's not a signature, but it was submitted by Lieutenant Mastrocola.
Okay, so there's no date, there's no signature on this internal investigation also of Antonio Gonzalez?
At least not on this copy.
Okay,
Maybe the investigation was of the officer, right? Not Antonio Gonzalez?
that's correct, sorry.
Okay.
Actually, the investigation was of the incident, period. So you have two internal investigations, one with Jay Anderson involving the Jay Anderson Jr. shooting, and the second involving the Antonio Gonzalez shooting, correct?
Yes.
And in both of those internal investigations, you have two reports that are undated and unsigned. Is that correct?
The ones I have here, I'm not sure if these are the originals that I would have that would be signed and dated.
Thank you. But it is typical, and you said that is important, that Wauwatosa police officers date and sign all their reports or internal investigations. Is
Yes,
that correct?
That is true.
Thank you. Now let's talk about statements that have been made with regards to the Jay Anderson shooting. Has Officer Joseph Mensah ever discussed the Jay Anderson shooting with you?
I think he probably has.
Okay.
Does that mean you're not sure?
In my informal discussions with him when he was on administrative leave, I asked him how things were going, so probably.
Okay.
Now, with regards to your conversations with Joseph Mensah, Officer Joseph Mensah, did he ever tell you that Jay touched his weapon when he encountered him on June 23rd, 2016?
Touched whose weapon?
That Jay Anderson ever touched his own gun while Officer Mensah was encountering him on June 23rd, 2016?
No.
Sorry. Sorry, a lot of folders. Do you recall December 23rd, 2020, you wrote a letter of recommendation for Joseph Mensah to be hired by the Waukesha County Sheriff's Department, correct?
Yes.
And in that letter of recommendation, you wrote that in each of them, and sorry, what I'm referring to is the December 23rd, 2020 letter that's addressed to the Waukesha Sheriff's Department as signed by Chief Barry Weber, exhibit number 3. In this letter, you wrote that in each of them, meaning in each of the 3 shootings that Officer Mensah was involved, Mensah was confronted by a person who was arrested and refused to put down their weapon. Where did you get the information from that Jay Anderson refused to put down his weapon?
Jay Anderson had the weapon right next to him. He had access to that weapon and was reaching for the weapon.
Where did you get the information from that Jay Anderson refused to put down his weapon? That would mean that he was touching it and he refused to put it
He was
down.
reaching for the weapon.
Where did you get the information that Jay Anderson refused to put down his weapon?
As I just said, I consider Anderson armed. He had that weapon right next to him within his reach and was reaching for that weapon.
So that's how you're
He
interpreting
was an
refusing?
armed subject, yes, and he refused to follow the officer's directions.
Did anyone ever tell you that Jay Anderson touched his weapon?
What I was told was that he was reaching for the weapon. That's
Did
what the
anyone
video
ever,
said.
please answer my
One at a
questions.
time, please, counsel.
Please answer my questions
No,
that I'm giving to you. Did Joseph Mensah tell you that Jay Anderson touched his weapon on June 23rd, 2016?
not that I recall that he said that to me.
Did Joseph Mensah tell you that Jay Anderson touched his weapon and also refused to put down his weapon on June 23rd, 2016?
No,
So your interpretation is because there was a weapon there and he didn't touch it, that's how you're determining that he refused to put down his weapon.
that is correct.
You're still sticking with this.
He was armed and he was reaching for the weapon.
It's okay if you made a mistake in this letter, Chief.
No, you can't, but I'm gonna, that question's not gonna be allowed.
Okay, no problem. Now, you indicated that you recall this conversation you had with Steve Biskupich on September 21st, 2020.
Yes,
In that conversation, and this is Exhibit 1, page 57, you told Steve Biskupich that Mensah's gun was on the middle console.
yes.
Who told you that?
That was from the police reports that I ultimately saw.
What police report states that Jay Anderson's, or the gun that was in Jay Anderson's car, was on the middle
I
console?
believe in the compilation of all the reports that I saw, that's what I was told. It was on the middle console.
Who told you that? Did Joseph Mensah tell you that?
I don't believe so. I read those in the reports.
And you don't recall what report? Because every report that I've read, it says that there was a weapon that was on the passenger side seat.
I don't remember.
But you actually read a police report that says that the weapon was on the middle console, that you cannot remember.
When I was told that it was within his easy reach, I assumed it's on the console. Whether or not it was on the seat or on the console was within inches.
Well, that's kind of important to know as a law enforcement officer, correct? Where the weapon is.
If you're the officer that's on that scene, absolutely you need to know that.
Isn't it important as a supervisor to the officer in the scene that you also give accurate statements, especially to, when you're being interviewed for an investigation?
Yes,
And you told Attorney Stephen Biskupich, who was interviewing you and conducting an investigation, that the weapon in Jay Anderson's car was on the middle console. But you didn't know that to be accurate.
it was within a couple inches either way, so that's the way I answered
All
it.
right, I think we've covered this, and I'll ask you to reference the transcript also by line,
Okay.
so we know exactly what's being referenced.
So,
And I think the record should reflect it wasn't an interview, it was a deposition.
it's an interview.
Yeah, and I'm saying deposition.
Oh, thank you. So for the record, thank you, Your Honor. What we're referring to is Exhibit 1, page 57, lines 5 through 11.
And why don't you just read those into the record, since they've been referenced several times?
For the record, your answer was, well, I think it was on the console right close to where the driver could reach it. So Anderson could have reached for the weapon and pulled it up really fast, and the officer wouldn't have had a chance to defend himself. So yes, the answer is he was justified in my opinion.
And which lines are those, please?
That was lines 5 through 11.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, according to, you gave several interviews to media outlets as it relates to the Jay Anderson shooting. Do you recall that?
Yes,
And do you recall Officer Joseph Mensah also giving recent interviews discussing the Jay Anderson shooting?
he gave one that I'm aware of to a radio station.
Okay. And did you approve him to do those interviews?
No,
Okay. Based on your conversations and your knowledge of the Jay Anderson shooting, why was Officer Mensah in Madison Park on June 23rd, 2016?
Officer Mensah was assigned to that area of the city to patrol. And he was in the park earlier because there was people in the park after hours, so it was just a matter of routine patrol, and he was in there when he saw the car that Anderson was in.
Okay. But Officer Mensah was not assigned to that area on June 23rd, 2016. Do you know that?
I don't know.
But you just said he was assigned to that area.
The officers can go in different areas, and we don't have strict boundaries that they can't go in and out of. I don't know what area he was assigned that night.
Okay. Because it sounded like you made a distinction by saying he was assigned to that area and that's why he was there.
He had every right to be in there.
So just for my clarification, with regards to Officer Mensah, when he's on shift working, he can go anywhere in Wauwatosa. Being assigned to an area doesn't matter. You can just patrol anywhere. Is that how it works?
Not normally. Normally you're assigned to an area. The boundaries overlap depending on what's going on. And if another car is tied up on something, they can patrol another area.
Would you agree that if you have a seasoned officer like Lieutenant Roy, that someone with that experience should be able to make those judgment calls on whether or not they go beyond the assigned areas, as opposed to a rookie officer, as Officer Joseph Mensah was at that point in time?
When you say a rookie officer, how much time did he have on the department?
18 months.
Maybe he came from another department too, so I wouldn't characterize him as a rookie either.
So he's a rookie with the Wauwatosa Police Department.
He had more than 12 months on our department.
But he was a rookie police officer with the Wauwatosa Police Department.
I don't characterize it as a rookie with that time on.
He was a new police officer with the Wauwatosa Police
He was
Office.
a newer officer, but he was not a rookie.
Okay, so newer rookie, potato. He didn't have 20 years on him like Lieutenant Roy, correct?
Correct.
Right. So for him to be beyond his assigned area, only being on the Wauwatosa Police Department for 18 months, would you advise for that to, was that a regular practice for officers that were only with the Wauwatosa Police Department for 18 months to just patrol anywhere in the city of
I
Wauwatosa?
don't think he was patrolling anywhere, and it's not out of character, but that would be something that we'd take up with a supervisor if it was problematic.
I mean, this is not that fruitful unless you have some information about what his assigned area was that night.
I'm going to refer to what's already been marked as Exhibit 59. And according to the interview that Officer Mensah gave to Luke O'Day on June 24th, 2016, which was the day after the Jay Anderson shooting, he indicated that his area that he was supposed to be patrolling he was assigned to the area that encompassed West Burleigh Street to West Capitol, North 92nd Street to North 124th Street. So Burleigh to Capitol, and then 92nd to 124th Street.
That's what we used to call Squad 5's area, and that's what he would have been assigned, and that's where Madison Park is.
Well, do you know the address to Madison Park? Because it's not in that area.
It's still considered part of that squad area, but I don't know what the Madison Park
No, that was
address
me
is.
laughing.
Why, how is it considered part of that squad area? So he didn't mention that in his interview to Luke O'Day on June 24th, 2016, that Madison Park was part of his squad area.
If he's in Squad 5, which is that area that you just described, that's where he'd be.
That's where he was.
That's part of that squad area.
Oh, so he just didn't know where his squad area was? He only knew it was that sort of square perimeter, but didn't know Madison Park was included in that. He didn't tell that to Luke O'Day on purpose. But does that make sense?
It does not make any sense to me, and I would think maybe Mensah would have to talk to Luke O'Day. I don't even know who that is.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not real clear.
Just so you know, Luke O'Day was the lead investigator to the J. Anderson Jr. shooting. He's a Milwaukee Police Department officer at the time. I believe he was a detective on this day. Now, according to Mensah's sort of interviews that let me just take that back. As you know, Officer Joseph Mensah was involved in Antonio Gonzalez shooting, correct?
Correct.
And in that shooting, he fired his weapon 8 times. Is that correct?
I don't know how many times he fired it, but yes, he fired his weapon.
Okay. And he had a partner with him that fired his weapon 1 time, Officer Newman, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And as it relates to the J. Anderson shooting, that happened on June 23rd, 2016, he fired his weapon 6 times. Is that correct?
I'm not sure how many times, but okay.
Okay. And as it relates to the Alvin Cole shooting that happened February 2nd, 2020, he fired his weapon 5 times. Is that correct?
I think so, yes.
Okay. So in total, Officer Joseph Mensah fired his weapon 19 times within a 4.5 time period with the Wauwatosa Police Department. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. He gave an interview where he said that the totality of his shootings is not an anomaly in the Wauwatosa Police Department. That essentially, I take that as him saying that it's not unusual for other Wauwatosa police officers to have fired their weapon just as many times, if not more. Is that an accurate statement?
I don't know the context at which he was speaking.
Okay. Sorry. I believe Officer Mensah, in his interview to the media, states that the totality of his 3 shootings is not an anomaly, even within his own department. Would you agree with that statement?
Again, I don't know the context of the whole thing he was talking about or what that was all about.
Officer Mensah stated that the totality of his 3 shootings is not an anomaly within his own department. Do you agree that the totality of the 3 shootings involving Officer Mensah is not an anomaly, even with the Wauwatosa Police Department?
That it's not an anomaly?
Correct.
He was faced with 3 different situations that he was put into a bad spot then too, so I'm not sure how I'd characterize that.
Is it normal for Wauwatosa police officers to shoot 19 times within a 4.5 time period?
That's not a good question. you aware of anybody else that's fired their weapon 19 times in the past 30 years while you've been chief?
No, sir, I'm not.
How many times have you fired your weapon in the line of duty while you've been chief?
I have not.
So you've been chief for over 31 years and you haven't fired your weapon one time.
I have not.
Thank you. And you were here for Lieutenant Roy's testimony earlier, and he also testified that he's been an officer for 20 years, and he also hasn't fired his weapon for ever since he's been in law enforcement.
Yes.
So do you know if firing your weapon 19 times within a 4.5 year time period, is that an anomaly?
You know, I would answer that by saying, depending on the situation that you're faced with, because officers can't choose what calls they go on. For the situation that he was faced with, I don't think it was.
I think this topic's been exhausted.
Yeah, I think so. So Chief, last thing, we're almost done. We've just received 3 letters as it relates to Officer Mensah's fitness for duty. We have 1 letter dated September 14th, 2020, 1 letter dated August 31st, 2020, and a 3rd letter dated December 15th, 2020.
Yeah.
Prior to the Jay Anderson shooting on June 23rd, 2016, you didn't receive any letters from any psychologist with regards to Mensah's fitness for duty. Isn't that correct?
Not that I'm aware of.
And despite not receiving any letters prior to June 23rd, 2016, you didn't receive any information from any psychologist with regards to Officer Mensah's fitness for duty. Isn't that correct?
No, I don't think that's true. I think I got, when Officer Mensah was going to counseling, I got word from the counselor that he was seeing too, what his status was.
What's the name of the counselor?
Jay Shrinsky,
Can you spell that for the record?
SCHRINSKY, I believe.
And so Counselor Jay Shinsky, he told you before the Jay Anderson shooting on June 23rd, 2016, that Officer Mensah was fit for duty.
I believe that we were sending Mensah to him, and he probably said that to me because I would get updates from him.
He probably did, but you don't
Probably.
know if he did.
I don't have a date down.
Okay. And Officer Jay Shrisky, would you email each other back and forth?
Never.
Never. Why not?
I don't do a lot with emails. I don't do a lot with text messages, as you probably find out.
Mm-hmm.
I talk to people in person,
And you talked to him in person about this.
on the phone.
Do you recall what date you did that exactly?
I don't.
Okay. But you did testify that it's important to, for officers to write reports and also to conduct internal investigations. Isn't that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. So did you write a report about this as an officer who thinks it's important to write reports about things?
I did not write the report.
Why not?
There was no need for me to write the report. The reports have all been documented as to what was transpired on the incident. And once I got word from the counselor that the guy's okay to come back, that was what my concern was.
Mm-hmm. And why was, did you send Officer Joseph Mensah to a counselor after the Antonio Gonzalez shooting to find out whether or not he was fit for duty?
Probably we did, just to make sure that he and the other officer were okay.
When you said probably we did, would you have given that task to somebody else to say that?
I would have.
Who would you have given that task
Probably
to?
one of the captains.
Do you know which one?
Back then, it may have been Captain Sharpie. He may have still been captain before he retired.
So you may have told Captain Sharpie to do what in relation to fitness for duty?
Contact Jay. Let's see if he's okay.
Contact Joseph.
Contact Jay Shrinsky. The
Oh, sorry,
counselor.
Jay. And what does that mean, contact Jay to see if he's okay?
To make some appointments for Joe or for any officer so they can talk to him and see if they're fit to come back.
And Tim Sharpie, he would use emails, correct?
I don't know.
Okay, so he probably didn't just call him. He probably sent an email to Jay.
No, we'd probably call them. We do a lot of things with, I just said, like, again, I like the direct contact with people.
Okay, but Captain Sharpie would have communicated to you that he had contacted Jay with regards to Joseph Mensah,
Yes.
and he would have sent you an email?
No, everybody just told me about it because I meet with the captains every morning.
So all these communications are conveniently not, there's no record for it.
We talk in person, so we don't document those.
So then why are all these letters that I have from December 15, 2016, August 21st, 2020, September 14th, 2020 in relation to Joseph Mensah's fitness for duty? If you do everything in writing, why do I have these letters?
I don't know where those letters came from.
So prior to December 15, 2016, there are no letters, no written documentation that you have from any psychiatrist about Officer Mensah's fitness for duty.
If I had them, they probably would have been provided already, so I don't have them.
Okay. And if you had them, then you would have given it to the court
As
in
required.
response to the subpoena.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you didn't do that.
No.
So the presumption is they don't exist.
That's what I assume, because we have in the personnel files, there's a medical file, and I think if we had to provide the medical file, then that's already been given out.
But there's no medical information on here.
Okay.
Right? This is just, he's essentially, whether or not he's,
I'd like you to do is identify these letters by date and by author, because he's not been told even who wrote these yet. So
I'm sorry.
I think questioning him about them without that knowledge is a little unfair.
Okay, I'm sorry. So, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I just received this. So the letter dated December 15th, 2016, which I would like to mark as Exhibit 90. It was addressed to you, Chief Weber, and it was signed by a Dr. Rick C. Bauman, last name Bauman, who is an organizational psychologist. Do you recall receiving a letter December 15, 2016 from a Dr. Bauman, Bauman, regarding Joseph Mensah fitness for duty?
Not getting that letter specifically, but Dr. Bauman is our psychologist that we use, so I get a lot of letters from him.
Okay. And based on this letter, and I just received this, so I'm quickly reading it myself, he doesn't give any medical diagnosis. He doesn't, indicate whether or not Mensah's on any medications or not.
I think if you're going to ask some questions about the contents of the letter, you got to let them see it.
Okay. Sorry, Your Honor, I thought you wanted to do the recollection.
Well, I believe he indicated he doesn't recall, so
I'm just gonna write on the back, Exhibit 90. Yes, too.
And who wrote the other letter, counsel?
The other letters were written by the dates September 14, 2020, was written by Marcia Williams, Marcia Williams, plural. And then this from Systemic Perspectives. And the third letter was written by Dr. Rick Bauman. It's dated August 31st, 2020, with Ascend Talent Strategies.
I believe the two letters offering opinions regarding fitness are signed as organizational psychologists, both of them. Is that right?
Well, the one with Rick Bauman is signed as an organizational psychologist, but Marcia Williams, she's LPC.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to give you all these letters. Do you mind? So I'm going to label the August 31st, 2020 letter as Exhibit 91. And this is the letter that's signed by Rick Bauman. And then the letter of September 14th, 2020, as signed by Marcia Williams, I'm labeling as Exhibit 89. Thanks. Let me know when you're ready, Chief.
Yeah, I think it was about 11 o'clock. You told me you're almost done. Giving allowance for what that means to lawyers. Are we going to go right up to noon here or what?
I think after we're done with this, we're done.
Okay.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. Let's see. Sorry. Okay. So let's just go in chronological order. And starting with the Exhibit 90, the December 15, 2016 letter. Do you see
Yes,
that?
Yes,
It's a 2-page letter.
yes,
So in this letter that's signed by Dr. Rick Bauman, the last paragraph of the letter is him basically confirming that Officer Mensah can perform patrol office duties without restriction. Do you see that?
officer duties, yes,
Patrol officer duties without restriction.
yes,
Correct. So so this is essentially what is known, and as you see in this letter, there's no medical information. Is that accurate?
Well, he talks about psychological health, so I'd argue that it is medical, but okay.
In this letter, there's no biographical information regarding Officer Joseph Mensah. Is that accurate?
Yes,
Okay. So this is a letter that that's labeled as fitness for duty. Now, based off this letter, you took this assessment and decided that it was okay to put Joseph Mensah back out on the street. Is that accurate?
absolutely correct.
Okay. So let's go to the letter dated August 31st, 2020, Exhibit 91. Do you see that letter?
Yes,
Now, according to this letter that's signed by Dr. Rick Bauman, he indicated that he only saw Officer Mensah twice, correct?
he doesn't say in this second letter that he saw him twice.
Show them where you're looking.
Okay. So it says maybe just the August 31st, 2020 letter.
Yes,
Okay. So in the first paragraph, he writes, "My records show that I originally met with Joseph Mensah on December 1st, 2014.
yes,
At that time, I performed a psychological assessment in consideration of him as a candidate for the position of patrol officer with the Wauwatosa Police Department.
yes,
Then the second time he saw him was December 7th, 2016, for the purposes of providing a fitness for duty evaluation.
okay,
So he saw him only twice.
okay,
So he did not see, Dr. Rick Bauman did not see Joseph Mensah in between, according to this letter, in between December 1st, 2014 through December 7th, 2016.
I believe that's true.
So he did not see him after the Antonio Gonzalez shooting, but he did see him after the Jay Anderson shooting.
Yes,
Thank you. So let's look at the last letter, the one dated September 14th, 2020. Now, according to this letter that's dated September 14th, 2020, which it's a recent letter, right?
September, yes,
Right. according to this letter, Marcia Williams, who's an LPC, I don't know what that means, a license, something. She indicated that she saw and evaluated Officer Mensah on July 27, 2015. Do you see that, the first sentence?
Yes,
Okay. Regarding a critical police event that occurred on July 16, 2015. See that?
yes,
In this letter, she did not say that officer was fit for duty after the Antonio Gonzalez shooting. Isn't that correct?
that's true.
In this letter, she does not say that anyone else said that Officer Mensah was fit for duty. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
I have nothing further.
Can I get the name of this woman again, please?
Marcia Williams, Williams plural.
And what was the name of the psychologist again, please?
Rick C. Bauman, Bauman, for both the other letters.
Chief Weber, you indicated that you've had experience dealing with the doctor, Dr. Bauman, correct?
Yes, sir.
And how about Marcia Williams? Have you had dealings with her in the past in connection with the assessment of officers' fitness for duty?
I know the name, Judge, but I don't know her.
Do you know if she works with or under Mr. Bauman, Dr. Bauman?
I don't think she works with him.
Do you have any idea how an officer would have been referred to her?
I do not know.
And you also referenced in the beginning what you called a counselor named Jay Shrinsky, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that, as far as we know, sitting here, was the only assessment of Officer Mensah done subsequent to the Gonzalez shooting. Is that your understanding?
Yes, sir.
And what do you know about the qualifications of Counselor Shrinsky?
I do not know his qualifications. I know he also represents Milwaukee police officers who have been involved in critical incidents too.
Okay, so you're aware of, you have no awareness with regard to either his education or, I'm inferring he's not a psychologist, so you have any additional information as to what might qualify him to render opinions regarding an officer's fitness?
Not firsthand, Judge.
You would agree, wouldn't you, that with regard to psychological fitness, that ought to be assessed by a psychologist or psychiatrist?
I'm sorry?
I said, if we're talking about someone being assessed for fitness subsequent to a shooting, don't you think it'd be appropriate for somebody to be assessed by either a psychiatrist or a psychologist?
Yes, sir.
Anything further here?
One question. So you have no written proof or written reports or any written proof that there was a fitness for duty evaluation conducted on Officer Joseph Mensah after the Antonio Gonzalez shooting. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Chief Weber. You can step down, put your mask on. I'm going to ask members of the gallery to refrain from making comments to the chief on his way out. I appreciate the way everyone's conducted themselves today. And so we're looking at Detective Burns and who else this afternoon? Anybody?
William Harmony.
Oh, that's right, I forgot. He'll be appearing by Zoom again, is that right?
No, William Harmony is here.
Oh, thank God.
Where are you?
You guys
I don't
don't.
need to see him, he's out in the hall, it's fine.
You guys will like him.
Okay,
He testified in the first hearing.
is there anything else you want to take up this morning?
No, Your Honor.
Right, then let's convene. We've got a couple things I want to do. Let's convene at 2:00. I've got a couple things to deal with at 1:30, and then we'll resume testimony.
Thank you.
And let's let the chief leave first before everybody exits the room. Go ahead. Good to see you. We're going to conclude the daycast at this time. Thank you again, members of the gallery, for your interest and the way you've done this morning.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
All right, so we will come back to that. All right, so I'll take a little bit of time here if you guys have questions or anything. Is anybody, like, this is your first time watching anything to do with this hearing that kind of doesn't know what's going on, that's watching? If you guys are watching through a restream, you are actually watching Never Stop Media. So come over here. Come to the actual source. Yeah, I'll be streaming this at 2 o'clock again. All right, Jennifer's first time. Anyone else first time? Aaron. All right, so here's what I'm gonna kind of do then, just to give you guys an understanding of what in the hell's going on. So the short of this is that former officer Joseph Mensah, former Wauwatosa officer, has shot and killed 3 people in a 5-year period. Antonio Gonzalez and then Jay Anderson, which is what this hearing is about, and then Alvin Cole. He's now a Waukesha County Sheriff because he resigned from Tosa. This is what I'm looking for. Sorry, excuse me. All right, so I'm just gonna so I linked 2 articles, but I'll kind of go through those for you first timers. So February 25th, 2021, attorney Kimberly Motley's petition to the court for a John Doe hearing commenced. Before we get into the specifics of the initial hearing, what exactly is a John Doe hearing and why is this important? Under Wisconsin Statute 968.02, Section 3, if a district attorney refuses or is unavailable to issue a complaint, a circuit court judge may permit the filing of a complaint. If the judge finds there is probable cause to believe that the person to be charged has committed an offense after conducting a hearing. If the district attorney has refused to issue a complaint, he or she shall be informed of the hearing and may attend. The hearing shall be ex parte without the right of cross-examination. During ex parte hearings, there is no right to cross-examination, and witnesses have no right to counsel during questioning. So that's why with Attorney Bayer, I think his name is, when Motley was questioning the chief, there was a person that spoke in the background when the mistake comment was made, and that attorney tried to speak up, and the judge immediately shut it down because these people don't have a right to counsel. There's no like cross-examining counsel. It's just one lawyer and the judge. So that's why that happened. This is a historical moment in Wisconsin legal history, as no John Doe hearings have ever been filed against a police officer. We could see this special type of hearing become more common considering the vast amount of district attorneys refusing to file charges against law enforcement personnel during critical incidents that involve death of another and strategically be used as another way to bring justice to families who lost a loved one. After what I heard in this initial appearance, all critical incidents should be handled this way to avoid bias and corruption. On June 23rd, 2016, Jay Anderson was parked in his car asleep at Madison Park, where he would be confronted by then Wauwatosa police officer Joseph Mensah, who opened fire on Anderson, alleging Anderson lunged for a gun. Anderson was struck 4 times by Mensah, resulting in his death. Anderson's death would be Mensah's second death-related shooting. Prior to the hearing, former Wauwatosa officer Joseph Mensah, who was responsible for shooting and killing 3 individuals, Antonio Gonzalez, Jay Anderson Jr., and Alvin Cole, within a 5-year period, filed a motion to quash his subpoena. I don't think anyone expected Mensah to testify during this hearing, and we will more than likely see Mensah plead the 5th, which he ended up doing, in order to protect himself from incrimination. Argument on this motion is scheduled for March 12th. It will be interesting to hear a judge's ruling on Mensah's Fifth Amendment right to remain silent on the stand, considering Mensah violated department policy by openly making statements to the media about his involvement in the 3 shootings. Because of these public statements, Mensah may not be afforded the right to stay quiet. During an interview Mensah gave on the Dan O'Donnell radio show, Mensah states, "This is crazy because if you were to look at my department and other departments as well, there are several officers that have fired way more." That's a direct quote taken from that transcript. Referring to Motley's notice of Mensah firing his weapon 19 times during the 3 shootings. Mensah goes on to state, like a 3-year-old pouting regarding his suspension, that he violated no policy and no procedures. "I did absolutely nothing wrong, yet I'm still suspended. For what?" I'll get into Mensah's policy violations later in the article that everyone seemed to overlook or ignore during the initial investigation. Mensah goes on during the interview to talk about other critical incidents that other officers were involved in and states that, honestly, some of them worse than mine. According to records, there are no other incidents involving a Wauwatosa police officer involved in a critical incident worse than Mensah's, by which an incident resulted in death. Mensah is the only officer during a 10-year period that fired their service weapon that resulted in anyone's death. It is worthy to note that the Common Council voted unanimously to fire Mensah, but he was only suspended. Current Chief of Police for Wauwatosa, Barry Weber, has also filed a motion to quash his subpoena. Some key verbiage in Weber's motion to pay very close attention to, which I will highlight later in this article. Chief Barry Weber has no competent, relevant, or material evidence to offer regarding the subject matter of these proceedings, nor does he have any documents responsive to the request contained within the subpoena. It also states that Wauwatosa Police Chief Barry Weber did not participate in this investigation in any capacity. The sole investigative body reviewing this matter and the death of Mr. Anderson was the Milwaukee Police Department. As a result, Chief Weber possesses no firsthand knowledge of any of the facts and circumstances surrounding the officer-involved death of Jay Anderson Jr. and was not a participant in or witness to the subsequent investigation. Arguments for this motion will also be heard on March 12th. So today we heard that the chief actually showed up to the scene. That was the first time we've ever heard that. And that shit is not written in any fucking document. So that's interesting. During attorney Kimberly Motley's opening statement in front of Judge Glenn Yamahiro, she made several points that I will touch on in this article, where Joseph Mensah has conflicting statements regarding the shooting of Jay Anderson Jr. Motley believes the district attorney's office was a conflict to investigate all 3 shooting cases, and Mensah's interaction was reckless and inconsistent with his training and not objectively reasonable. The first witness called to the stand was Hakeem Fudge, who was the last person to see Anderson before his fatal encounter with Mensah. During the line of questioning, Fudge spoke of his relationship with his friend Baby J, noting that Anderson was not a confrontational individual. Fudge stated numerous times that when the 2 friends hung out, that they would go to safe places where they felt comfortable, where no altercations would occur. On the night of June 23, 2016, Fudge stated that the 2 spent the evening in a local bar. A critical point to note in Fudge's testimony was that the 2 needed a valid ID to enter the bar and that they were both ID'd before entering. This is an important piece of information that would come up later in testimony and also conflict with statements given by Mensah. The second witness that testified was Dr. I can't pronounce her first name. Her last name's Tolomek. A pathologist for the Milwaukee County Medical Examiner's Office. Dr. Tolomek testified that Anderson was brought to Frederick Hospital and pronounced dead at 4:05 a.m. She did not gain access to Anderson until 8:20 a.m. when she conducted the autopsy. Tolomek testified that several people were in the room during the autopsy: a forensic investigator with the medical examiner's office, a Milwaukee detective, Michael Braun Ryder, and a Wauwatosa detective, Joseph Lewandowski. She stated it is not uncommon for law enforcement to be present during an autopsy. In the synopsis, she mentioned it stated as to Anderson's death that a 25-year-old male was shot by a Wauwatosa police officer because he failed to obey commands to exit the vehicle, but she could not recall who told her this information. So that statement, failed to obey commands to exit the vehicle, it's an untrue statement. Not by her, but by the officers. Tolomek went on to testify to the gunshot wounds that struck Anderson. As Tolomek testified, images of Anderson and the gunshot wounds loaded onto a viewing screen in the courtroom. She testified that there were 6 shots total, 4 of which struck Anderson, resulting in 4 entrance wounds and 2 exit wounds. The first gunshot entered Anderson on the right side of his head by his right ear, and the exit was behind the left ear. This resulted in a straight through and through wound. That's extremely important. The second shot struck Anderson above the right ear and again exited behind the left ear, resulting in a straight through and through wound. The third shot struck Anderson in his right cheek and produced no exit wound. The fourth shot struck Anderson on top of the right shoulder and was lodged in his left side back muscles. The direction of these wounds is going to be vital when it pertains to straight through and through. Anderson's blood alcohol level was 0.114 at the time of the shooting. Tolomek testified that unlike our metabolism working alcohol through our system, when a person dies, the body stops metabolizing the alcohol in the system. She determined the cause of death was the result of gunshots and the manner of death was homicide. Tolomek testified that there are 5 manners of death: natural, accident, suicide, homicide, and undetermined. Homicide, by its simplest definition, is death by the hands of another. Tolomek labeled it a homicide further than just a simple definition after extensive review of the investigation, videos during the scene, police reports, medical records, and her own investigation during the autopsy. Tolomek's testimony was crucial when speaking of the reasons she determined the death of Anderson to be a homicide above the simple definition in medical language. She signed off on the autopsy and homicide death of Anderson on July 19, 2016. Motley questioned if at any time Chief Barry Weber was present during the autopsy or have access to Anderson's body. Tolomek stated he was not and would have to be logged if Weber viewed the body. Pay close attention to this detail later. The third and final witness for the day was William Harmoning, who you guys are going to hear later on today. A retired law enforcement officer of 37 years, whose career is pretty notable and now acts as an expert witness for critical incident cases revolving around officer-involved shootings. He has worked approximately 200 cases in 31 states, some more notable such as Michael Brown, Dontre Hamilton, and currently George Floyd. Harmoning testified that there is a bias in investigations, which is almost always present because there really isn't a comprehensive and independent investigation. He then went on to testify, unless there is tension between apartments, a review will be biased. Under Wisconsin Statute 175.47, Section 3A, must require an investigation conducted by at least 2 investigators, one of whom is the lead investigator and neither of whom is employed by the law enforcement agency that employs a law enforcement officer involved in the officer-involved death. This law is the result of the Michael Bell shooting that happened in Kenosha back in 2004. This law is going to play a vital role as I outline the investigation and misconduct by the Wauwatosa Police Department. Harmoning would testify that he does not believe Mensah had a reasonable fear for his safety. Under the 1985 case Tennessee v. Garner, where a civil case in which the Supreme Court held that under the Fourth Amendment, when a law enforcement officer is pursuing a fleeing suspect, the officer may not use deadly force to prevent escape unless the officer has probable cause to believe that the suspect poses a significant threat of death or serious physical injury to the officer or others. Harmoning reviewed the evidence surrounding the Anderson death and in his expert opinion evaluating the totality of evidence and reasonable officer standard that Anderson posed no active or imminent threat to Mensah as seen in the 1989 case Graham v. Connor, where the Supreme Court determined that an objective reasonableness standard should apply to a civilian's claim that law enforcement officials used excessive force in the course of making an arrest, investigatory stop, or other seizure of his person. Harmoning testified to reviewing Mensah's training, background, discipline, prior shootings, and video, and looked into whether Mensah had any forensic psychological review after the Antonio Gonzalez shooting, which is what we're hearing today in this case. He stated that as police officers are human and not robots, any officer involved in a critical incident involving deadly force should be evaluated and supervised. Regardless if a critical incident is justified or not, it has impact on the officer. To our knowledge, Wauwatosa Police Department does not have a policy for officers to undergo any type of evaluation, and there is no evidence Mensah was evaluated or supervised per his return after each shooting. Harmoning testified that he believes evidence was compromised by the Wauwatosa Police Department during the investigation. Attorney Motley loaded the dash cam video of the Anderson shooting, and Harmoning walked her through a variety of moments in the video. That video is up on our YouTube channel. He noted that at the start of the video, Mensah had activated his body cam after the shooting, which went back 28 seconds. This is against policy. He also noted that Mensah was in a shooting position. Harmoning stated that there would be no reason for Mensah to be in this position as he had no probable cause that Anderson had committed a crime. Mensah would not have had time to notice Anderson being intoxicated, nor would he know if the gun in Anderson's car was legal or not, as Wisconsin is an open carry state. At the time of Mensah's interaction with Anderson, it was nothing more than an ordinance violation for being in a park past 10 p.m. He stated this was not consistent with police training. Motley loaded up the Wauwatosa Police Department vehicle training slide on the screen and dove into questioning with Harmoning. He testified that again, Mensah broke policy, that his positioning of the squad car was not safe. Typically during a traffic stop, law enforcement pulls their vehicle behind yours, at least a car length behind, and slightly offset on the driver's side, allowing some cover for the officer against traffic. During the stop, the officer would shine their squad light into your rear view mirror. This is intended to blind the person, Harmoning stated, so they can't see the approach of the officer. The approach is the most dangerous time during a traffic stop. Mensah positioned his car in front of Anderson and turned his light on, which meant Mensah put himself in an unsafe view by illuminating himself, which was inconsistent with his training. Harmoning testified that Mensah had 3 safer options that night: back up to his own vehicle and wait for backup, could have approached from the other side of the vehicle and asked Anderson to not reach for the weapon, or he could have asked Anderson to step out of the car. Had Mensah chosen any of these options, Anderson would be alive today, he stated. Mensah created a dangerous situation. Anderson wasn't shot because he reached for a gun. He was shot because Mensah lost sight of his right hand. Anderson didn't have a chance that night, Harmoning added. What's critical in the statements Mensah gave during the investigation is that initially he never states Anderson lunged for a gun. Mensah added this detail later into the investigation. Harmoning believes Mensah needed to find a reason to have shot and killed Anderson, which is why Mensah added a furtive movement later in his statement. A furtive movement is either subtle or abrupt movement that alerts an officer a subject may become hostile. During statements given, Mensah notes that Anderson lifted and lowered his hands 5 times. It leaves question as to why Mensah didn't shoot the first 4 times. Harmoning questions the 5th time, which again, Mensah later adds the lunging for the gun. If we go back to Dr. Tolomek's testimony, with the angle of the first 3 gunshots, they were straight on, which would not be consistent with Mensah's statement that Anderson lunged. The angle of the entry wounds would not be straight on. It's quite clear in the dash cam video that the first shot was, in fact, to Anderson's head, straight on. It is also notable that considering Anderson's BAC level and the fact he was abruptly woken up, he would have been impaired enough and startled, resulting in his hands raising and lowering and his body potentially slouching. This was something else that Harmoning took issue with, the 6 shots. Knowing that law enforcement is trained to shoot until the threat stops, Harmoning questioned why Mensah continued firing his weapon if the first shot was the shot to the head. Because Mensah had no probable cause, Harmoning testified that all 6 shots were excessive. During the initial investigation, Mensah stated he was called to the scene where Anderson was, yet there is no record of a 911 call or a dispatch call to Mensah. Mensah had no knowledge of any crime that Anderson would be committing, and realistically, being in a park after close is nothing more than a ticket. Remember the Wisconsin statute where agencies can't conduct their own investigations? In a Wauwatosa police report, an officer searches Anderson's pockets. In his left pocket, he notes finding of a cell phone, a green plant in a bag, and currency. That shit's important too. He also notes an ID, but doesn't specify which pocket the ID was found. Mensah would make a statement during the investigation that Anderson didn't have an ID, and later states Anderson claims to have not had an ID, which we know to be untrue since Fudge testified they needed their IDs to get into the bar, and the Wauwatosa officer noted finding an ID. Later, when Milwaukee police would inventory Anderson's belongings, they would note the contents in the right pocket of Anderson, not the left. But in a statement given by Mensah, the cell phone and currency was on the passenger seat. In another document, it is noted that during the search of Anderson's pocket, he felt a faint pulse on Anderson, but never performed CPR, which is department policy. An ambulance would not arrive for 12 minutes. In another document, Detective Lewandowski would interview fire paramedics, which is concerning because the detective would hold influence interviewing staff from the same city. In total, around 20 Wauwatosa officers conducted investigations while on the scene and the following days after Anderson's death. The gun that was in Anderson's car was also removed by a Wauwatosa officer and seen in squad car video. What is also alarming, you can see officers remove the gun and proceed walking with their back to the camera intentionally and calling officers away from the view of the camera. This video was shared on the Never.Stop.Voices YouTube channel. Wauwatosa PD inventoried Mensah's gun and the bullets. When handling Anderson's gun, they did not inventory anything other than the gun was cleared. Later in a document, 16 bullets would be inventoried along with one in the chamber, which we've later found to be completely fucking untrue because they found that clip in the back seat of the car. Harmoning testified that Wauwatosa PD should have only safeguarded the scene and removed themselves once Milwaukee PD arrived. No Wauwatosa officer should have touched evidence, bottom line, Harmoning said. There have been multiple conflicting reports that each contradict each other. Motley pressed on with questioning and asked if Harmoning had seen any documents that involved Chief Weber reviewing Anderson's body. Harmoning testified that in an internal document, Chief Weber admits to going to the medical examiner's office and reviewed the wounds on Anderson's body, all which contradicts Weber's motion to quash. Argument that Milwaukee was the only agency to conduct an investigation and that Weber had no knowledge of anything to do with Anderson or the investigation. And now today we're fucking hearing that Dickface showed up at the fucking actual scene. That's nowhere. Harmoning would testify that he has concern with the chief being at the medical examiner's office because he would have great influence. And if the chief went there, he would have to sign into the log. It's fucking mandatory, and there's no log that has his name on it. If Tolomek had no knowledge of Weber in the medical examiner's office, and this visit was not logged, who let Weber in? Speaking of Chief Weber's blatant lies, not only to the public and the courts, he also lied to Mensah's new employer, the Waukesha County Sheriff's Department, where in a letter of recommendation, Weber states that Mensah was involved in 3 shooting incidents in our city. In each of them, he was confronted by a person who was armed and refused to put down their weapon. According to testimony and evidence in this John Doe hearing that was ignored during the initial investigation is that Jay Anderson Jr. never reached for a weapon. It's also factually true that Alvin Cole never pointed a gun at Mensah either. The hearing adjourned there at 5 p.m. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that was day one. So that's to kind of catch you up on everything that happened on day one. Day two, we wrote an article and we also live streamed that. So you guys can like go back and watch that whole fucking thing. Same as we're doing today. But this is what happened on day two. March 25th, 2021, day two of the John Doe hearing commenced. If you missed day one, you can catch up via our article, which I just read to you guys. First on the agenda was argument to be heard on Wauwatosa Police Chief Weber's motion to quash his subpoena. Chief Weber's reasoning behind his fight against his subpoena was that Milwaukee Police Department was the sole investigative agency in charge of the shooting of Jay Anderson Jr. by former Wauwatosa police officer Joseph Mensah, and that Chief Weber had no knowledge of any pertinent evidence to testify to. In documents obtained through open records requests, it has been found that Chief Weber saw Jay Anderson's body at the medical examiner's office, something expert witness William Harmoning questioned in the previous hearing date. During Judge Yamahiro's decision, he noted that there were significant things that Weber would need to answer, including whether or not Mensah followed department policies and procedures, a position Weber stands firm on that he did, despite evidence showing Mensah violated department policy numerous times. Weber will need to answer why there were 16 Wauwatosa officers conducting investigations, writing reports, touching evidence, and more importantly, removing evidence from the scene even days after the critical incident. So at that time, there were 16 documents from 16 different officers, but there's like 19 or 20 in total. Judge Yamahiro raised question and concern about Weber's conduct the day of the shooting and his actions afterwards. Next was an issue with open records that were redacted. A Wauwatosa lieutenant tried to fight the redaction, claiming that the same documents were court-ordered in another ongoing case and a judge had ordered specific information on these documents to be redacted. Yamahiro fired back that the case had no relevance in his John Doe hearing and ordered the documents to be released unredacted, which is what we ghetto kind of covered a few days ago. It was like a last minute change and I was trying to live stream from the car. It was super ghetto. Jay Anderson Jr.'s fiance, Starkeisha De La Rosa, testified that Milwaukee Police Department interviewed her for approximately 45 minutes and was at the house of Anderson's parents for over an hour. This would be more time spent interrogating the family than was spent with Mensah to question details about the shooting incident. MPD would question the family about why Anderson had marijuana in his possession, who his drug dealers were, and why he was cheating on De La Rosa, which nothing supported their claims. The line of questioning they endured was nothing more than an attempt to justify the shooting, death of Anderson, and to criminalize him immediately. De La Rosa testified that MPD officers told her the gun clip was found in the back seat of the car. Anderson was shot, in which Yamahiro noted was also in a report that came out during an open records request. This detail alone is hugely significant when it comes to Mensah and his numerous inconsistent statements. Without bullets, guns don't pose a threat to anyone. If there was no threat, why was Anderson shot multiple times and killed? The Anderson family and De La Rosa were never followed up with by Milwaukee PD, Wauwatosa PD, federal law enforcement, DOJ, or the DA's office to gather information as to Anderson's mental state, whereabouts, behaviors, employment, or any other questions that arise during an investigation. Next on the witness stand would be James Trainum, a former Washington, D.C. law enforcement detective and consultant on police investigations and confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is based on investigations getting pigeonholed with a rush to judgment, tunnel vision, supporting one theory before exploring other theories in an investigation, and specifically selecting evidence to support one theory without looking at the totality of evidence to determine if the theory is even correct. Confirmation bias impacts all elements of the investigation, Trainum stated. which leads to investigative pitfalls. Trainum testified that a good, thorough investigation should maintain an open mind, identify issues, develop questions, and seek information to test an officer's theories, crime scene analysis, witness interviews, and evaluation of statements, timeline before and after the incident, and victimology. You can't take anything at face value, he noted, a comment that highlights MPD's way of handling the investigation. As new evidence comes in with the collection, evaluation, comparison, and analysis to question all of it and compare it to make sure it fits the investigation. He stated the best way to miss evidence is to not look for it. Trainum went on to explain victimology, describing it as the background of Anderson as well as Mensah, what contributed to the event. Training, thought process of both parties, personality traits, how did Mensah handle similar encounters, the good and the bad. None of this was done by Wauwatosa or Milwaukee PD. Anderson was asleep in his car in Madison Park when he encountered Mensah. At some point, Mensah was behind Anderson's car, either on foot or from his squad car, because he called in Anderson's license plate. There was no front plate on Anderson's car. If Mensah was behind the car, why did he position his squad in front of Anderson's car? This is a question that has come up numerous times, which was heavily described to outline Mensah not following Wauwatosa's vehicle traffic stop policy. We know that Mensah was on the scene for 5 minutes and 35 seconds prior to the shooting. This was captured on video from the Madison Park Elementary School CCTV video. So for those of you guys that were kind of curious about that Madison Park video that they were talking about today, this is what all that is. What exactly happened during that time is unclear, as we only have Mensah's version, and so far he hasn't been very credible with his account of what happened. There are several things to note about the school video that infers a serious accusation of corruption on the part of Wauwatosa PD. Mensah claims he noticed other vehicles in the park prior to his encounter with Anderson on 2 separate occasions. What's interesting is that according to the video, Mensah wasn't in the park to have seen one of the sets of vehicles. So how would he have known this detail unless he was either told or shown the video in order to coach his statement? After the shooting death of Anderson, Mensah was not put on administrative leave. He was placed at a desk. The convenience of this was the department desk he was placed at was directly surrounded by the same officers who were investigating the incident. In multiple reports from the Milwaukee Police Department, they conveniently say the same thing or corroborate what the Wauwatosa police reports state, supporting the idea that Milwaukee didn't actually investigate very much and just adopted what Wauwatosa PD put in their reports. There was no follow-up to verify if what was in the reports was an accurate depiction. MPD didn't follow up with witnesses nor follow up with Wauwatosa PD, who took the reports. The danger in not conducting an independent investigation of an image, crime scene, or video is that MPD could be influenced and only focus on what was listed in the Wauwatosa Police Department report and miss critical evidence that could have been obtained had it been done independently from WPD. It also came out in the hearing that Mensah's interview about the shooting was conducted at the Wauwatosa Police Department and not in Milwaukee, where it should have been conducted, but more importantly, it wasn't recorded. Trainum took issue with this as it doesn't allow area to question Mensah on what was stated during the interview. It doesn't expose any inconsistencies in the interview or accuracy of what actually happened that night. These types of interviews should always be recorded, he stated. More focus in this hearing was directed towards Mensah's violation of department policies when it comes to traffic stops. In this hearing, some very serious issues with Mensah's actions that night directly led to the shooting of Anderson due to Mensah's creating officer-induced jeopardy, needlessly putting himself in danger, which should have been examined by the district attorney's office in the charging decision of Mensah. According to Wauwatosa PD policy, during all traffic stops, the red blue lights on the squad car are required to be activated for a couple of reasons. One, it lets a subject know, as well as citizens in the area, that police are conducting an investigation, stated Pamela Holmes, a former Milwaukee sergeant. Activating those lights also automatically turns on the squad camera. Mensah claims he activated his lights during another stop in Madison Park earlier that night, but for some reason he didn't activate his lights during the Anderson encounter. So because of that, that's kind of what they were arguing about today with that time frame of that Madison Park school video, that Motley only got video footage from this time to this time instead of the full time that she wanted, is because they're claiming that during two different sets of cars that were in the park, one of which Mensah would never have seen, but the other one he supposedly put his lights on. And as of right now, we have no evidence of that. And also what's important is that in all these reports, it claims that there is footage from, this time to this time, but we heard today, now all of a sudden they don't have fucking footage. That's why this case is fucking difficult. All right. So again, video captured from Madison Park Elementary School doesn't show this. That leaves serious room to question why. Mensah claimed he tried activating the squad camera from the attachment on his body, but it malfunctioned. When the squad camera was finally activated after the shooting of Anderson, it went back 28 seconds prior to the shooting, which captured the shooting itself, but also didn't capture Mensah's claim of trying to activate the camera. At no time did Mensah activate his audio mic, which is also required during all traffic stops according to WPD policy. Had Mensah activated this secondary device, it would have backed up his claim that he had conversation with Anderson and would have given a clearer picture as to what was said during the encounter. To date, according to documents handed over in an open records request, at no time did Mensah file a report for faulty equipment or malfunction, and MPD did not follow up on the equipment failure. Again, during the stop, the positioning of Mensah's squad in front of Anderson's vehicle was brought into question, and the use of the takedown lights, which we highlighted in the first article. Mensah lost tactical advantage in positioning his squad this way and also went against policy in his training, stated Trainum. One thing I found to be very clever during the testimony of Trainum is attorney Kim Motley kept calling out the real time, noting it for the record. The significance of this was to demonstrate the amount of time pertinent questions should have been asked and to show how much time was actually spent with Mensah during his interview, a mere 47 minutes. Less time than the time spent with the Anderson family criminalizing their son. Some other keynotes. That was fucking clever. You guys. That's on the live stream that we did for day 2. It's super fucking clever. Some other keynotes that were previously made public is that Mensah also radioed for backup. If Mensah was in danger and fearing for his safety, why did he not retreat back to his vehicle and wait for backup to arrive, especially if he wasn't in a safe tactical position for a potential gunfight? Again, due to the positioning of his vehicle, he would now also put the arriving officers' lives in jeopardy, according to Pamela Holmes. While Anderson was sleeping in his car, Mensah claims to have done a visual search of the interior of the vehicle, but made no mention or claim of Anderson's gun being visual on the passenger seat. In fact, he doesn't recall anything on the passenger seat. Later, he would state that during conversation with Anderson, he noticed Anderson look down, which then alerted Mensah to the gun. Leaves to question whether Mensah actually did a visual check of the inside of the car and whether the gun was actually in the front seat, considering the magazine was said to have been found in the back seat. With reports citing the magazine was in the back seat, if Mensah didn't see the gun at all, was there really a gun that Anderson allegedly lunged for within arm's reach? Even still, Mensah could have moved to his left to take himself out of the kill zone, which would have required Anderson to turn and shoot at Mensah if he in fact grabbed the gun. In turn, this could have resulted in less shots being fired and Anderson could still be alive. Due to this, Trainum believes Mensah's use of force was excessive. So that's the thing to remember too, right? So Jay is passed out. He's fucking just completely knocked out. And there's been testimony that he's like a very difficult person to wake up. Plus, he's intoxicated. Maybe he, smoked a joint. he's out. So that leaves so much time for Mensah to be walking around this car using the flashlight. What the fuck's in the car? And he's claiming all this stuff that he walked around the car and he looked inside the car, but he didn't see a fucking gun that's, supposedly just wide the fuck open on the passenger seat. Like, there's a lot with that. Trainum noted that it's important to look at policies to see if they were actually followed, because it would have shown that Mensah repeatedly placed himself in danger and steps could have been taken to avoid the shooting altogether. With Mensah's inconsistencies in his various statements, Trainum suggested that crime scene reconstruction should have been done. The purpose of the reconstruction would demonstrate what could Mensah see due to his takedown lights being to the front of Anderson's car, along with what could Anderson see with the lights in his eyes. Would Anderson even be able to tell that Mensah was a police officer since the red blue lights were not on? Trainum also went on to say that the reconstruction would help with officer memory, since things happened so fast and there was an officer-involved shooting. With the multitude of reports where officers can't recall where evidence was found and lack of photographic evidence of placement of the evidence, a reconstruction of the scene could have helped with that also. None of the officers took photographs of the gun on the passenger seat, the gun clip in the back seat, or the direction the muzzle of the gun was facing on the seat, which would directly impact the danger level of the situation. Mensah also claimed that when he saw the gun, he noticed an extended magazine sticking out of the gun. This detail seems very confusing, again because the magazine was found in the back seat, not in the gun itself, which was presumably on the passenger seat. And in a photo introduced as evidence, the magazine was not an extended magazine. Trainum also noted that MPD did not request Mensah's personnel file, which ideally would have alerted them to the Antonio Gonzalez shooting and death, where Mensah disengaged with Gonzalez before having to shoot. The question should have sparked a deeper look into Mensah's actions with Anderson and policies of what was the difference between the shootings that Mensah didn't disengage with Anderson, considering backup was on the way and there were several alternative steps that could have been taken to avoid the shooting and, more importantly, the death of Anderson. There are also inconsistencies with Mensah's statements regarding whether Anderson was asleep or not. In one statement, Mensah claims he thought Anderson was fake sleeping, but then in another statement, he reports waking Anderson up after visually searching Anderson's car and knocking on the window repeatedly. In another video we released on the Never.Stop.Voices YouTube channel, timestamp 3:10 a.m. in the video, after the shooting, it's shown that Wauwatosa officers removed the gun from the vehicle, which was improper. What's concerning is the fact the officers have their backs to the camera. The gun is never checked to see if it's loaded, let alone a magazine in the gun, and a lot of fumbling around with the gun before properly securing it, and hands inside officers' pockets. As we highlighted in the previous article and from this hearing, the proper photographic evidence of the gun was not done. There are also inconsistencies with reports between WPD and MPD on gun placement, whether it was loaded or not, and how many bullets. The amount of improper procedure when securing evidence that happened during this would make any judge's head spin, which Yamahiro seemed to catch as well. Finally, it was determined again from Trainum evaluating the records that surround the Anderson death that there was no evidence to support Mensah's claim that Anderson reached for or lunged for a gun. During Pamela Holmes' testimony, a former Milwaukee Police Department sergeant and current member of the Racial Disparities Task Force, if you're not doing anything wrong, you shouldn't have a problem recording. When she was asked by Motley about Mensah not activating his squad camera or audio mic, she followed with, as an officer, you have a duty to uphold the law, and you have to follow the rules, policies, and procedures set forth. If Mensah conducted himself this way, imagine how he handled himself in other cases. When Motley asked Holmes why she didn't think Mensah was charged in this case, Holmes responded, "How many times have you seen Wauwatosa Police Department in the news? He wasn't charged to avoid a payout for wrongdoing. Call it what it is, bad policing. Sometimes things go wrong. Admit it and move on. Don't cover it up." Holmes also doesn't believe Mensah feared for his safety. There's too many other things that could have been done, and he placed himself in that situation. Both Trainum and Holmes testified that they believe there is probable cause to support second-degree reckless homicide and homicide by negligent handling of a dangerous weapon. Had this investigation not been contaminated by the Wauwatosa Police Department and had Milwaukee Police Department thoroughly investigated, instead of taking WPD's reports and copying them, would the charging decision have changed regarding Mensah's employment? Even if he had just been fired for multiple policy violations at the time, then Alvin Cole presumably would still be alive. And Cole's picture is below. And then, yeah, that brings us to today's date. So that's that. Okay, now you guys are all caught up. Got it? Questions? If not, then I'm going to go take a little break and we'll come back a little bit before 2 p.m. But if you guys have questions, type them in real quick and I'll answer to the best of my ability. Yeah, for sure. So, and if you got, the first day, like I said, I didn't live stream because I was actually at the courthouse. The second one, we live streamed like we did this. That's on the YouTube page. So if you want to see like the whole thing for day 2, I believe it's 2 parts. So yeah, so you can watch day 2, and it's the same thing with this. So this will probably be and then, yeah, so I'll end up watching this a couple of times. I'll go back, I'll write an article, whatever. But yeah, so I mean, there's been like so much shit, and like they keep saying that he didn't violate policy, but like we're looking at all the policies and like he's violated multiple things. And it is essentially with all 3 of the incidents. With the Alvin Cole case, like there were other officers that were there, and Mensah like just pulled up, got out of the car, walked up to Alvin and just executed him. So, and yeah, I mean, Tosa should not have been investigating. Like everybody has said that, like Tosa should not have done anything. They shouldn't have gone through his pockets. They shouldn't have touched the gun. They shouldn't have been canvassing the area, even days later. And the judge caught that shit too. And we heard a little bit more about that earlier today too. So, and like with the last hearing, like, I mean, they said like, maybe a certain Tosa officer has like a relationship with the school. So like MPD would have been like, hey, we need you to go pick this up since you have a better relationship, whatever. In situations like that, like, maybe that's okay, but then that evidence should have immediately been turned over, not fucking Wauwatosa watching the video, writing a report about what they saw in the video, and then hand that over. And like basically with that particular incident, what it sounds like based off MPD's report is that MPD says, okay, I've got the video and I got Wauwatosa's report, so I'm going to read this report. I'm watching this video as I'm reading the report. Yep, Wauwatosa like wrote this. This sounds great. they didn't sit there and watch the video independent by themselves without reading the report. And then MPD's report says the same shit as Tosa's. So it doesn't highlight that, you know, Mensah said he was in the park and there were 2 other situations with vehicles, one of which he would have never even saw because he wasn't in the fucking park. So there's a lot. And like, that's the thing, like, you know, where this case right here, what we're seeing, this is such a good example of when there are these officer involved shootings, right? And the police department and then institutional media just immediately fucking criminalizes these people. And we're not only seeing that this particular officer, you know, probably did some shady shit. We're seeing, you know, the police department probably did some shady shit amongst all the other stuff that we were all exposing with Tosa. But, you know, we're seeing how these investigations are actually handled. They're not independent. We're seeing that reports don't actually go to the district attorney's office. Videos don't actually go. These people are not asking certain questions they should be asking. And that's the type of shit that, like, we need to be questioning. So that whole, you know, let's just believe what the fucking police and the DA say, like, this is a great example of why we should not be doing that. Like, why this stuff needs to be questioned, you know? And even if these people, because like you just hear, oh, Jay Anderson fucking armed with a gun, he's black, and then he's got marijuana, he's got some money on him, so he's a drug dealing criminal that's armed, police shoot him, yay yay, hero cop. And that's not fucking how this went. And there's so many other individuals like Baby J that have gone through the same exact thing, where we're seeing some very fucked up shit. Dontre Hamilton's case, Tyrese West in fucking Mount Pleasant. Like, there's so many that shit's fucked up. It's not right. Something's wrong. So this case, this John Doe hearing is not only exposing that Mensah is a fucking lunatic, Barry Weber is a liar or doesn't fucking know. I don't even know why he's the chief. He doesn't know what's going on in his department at all. He might as well just stay home. I don't know. But, you know, and then these departments break in Wisconsin law. They can't be investigating. So, yeah, I don't think she asked that today, but she's brought it up in like the last two hearings. So I think the judge is irritated with Weber. You know, he really didn't seem to kind of like Weber on day 2. So he seems kind of annoyed with Weber. So, but yeah, there's some more witnesses. They're supposed to resume at 2. So we'll see. You know, we'll see what happens. Obviously, on, you know, the first article I read, we kind of touched on what William Harmoning said. I think you guys will like him. He's like a really fucking killer witness. So pay attention very closely to the types of things he says. Yeah, I mean, you know, we kind of knew, or at least I did. I knew Weber was going to be a bit combative. There was going to be a lot of, I don't recall, I don't know. But I think, you know, and I'll highlight it when I write the article, some of the shit that I heard, I think that's, you know, I think Weber did bury himself. And especially we know that Weber either went to the medical examiner's office or he was shown the pictures of Jay Anderson's body with the bullet wounds to the head. So it's one of those two. We know that for a fact that he did review the body. And then now today we fucking hear that this he went to the fucking crime scene. So like that's it. It's huge. And especially when they filed the motion to quash the subpoena for his testimony, he's like, oh, I don't fucking know anything. You went there, bro. You were at Madison Park. So like none of us knew that. That's not in a fucking report anywhere. Like that came out in testimony. Yeah, I went to the scene, and yeah, I had some comments with Mensah. Like the fuck, bro. So none of us knew that. That came out today. That's a holy fuck moment right there. So. But yeah, so I mean, like, as much detail as I put in the first two articles, you know, they are long, they are very detailed, and I specifically did that. So today's article will be, you know, the same thing once this is done, and I reviewed it. So, but yeah, we'll come back as part 2. If you guys have any questions or whatever, just write them down, and like I'll do my best to answer questions during breaks and things like that. So we'll see what's up. But I'm gonna jump off. I'm gonna take a little break. Around 2 o'clock they're gonna start, so we'll jump on a little bit beforehand. Yeah, it's definitely insane. There's a lot that they didn't document, and they should have. A lot that should have been questioned. It wasn't. A lot of investigating by MPD that should have been done that wasn't. Verifying, even following up with witnesses that Tosa fucking interviewed. Like MPD didn't follow up with the witness. They just took Tosa's report. So they never went out there themselves and were like, okay, what did you see? Is this what you told Tosa PD? They never did that. So, this should, Tosa's getting fucking ripped apart. Like the amount of stuff that all of us have been uncovering with Tosa. So yeah. But yeah, so I gotta make a phone call, and then I got an email while we were all chatting about some open records from Wauwatosa that we gotta figure out fucking money. So yeah, let me read all that, and then I'll see you guys back around 2 p.m. Peace.